of the Bel Air Board of Town Commissioners. And I will now call the roll. Commissioner Rutledge.
Here.
Commissioner Chismar.
Here.
Commissioner Taylor.
Here.
And Commissioner Chance.
Here.
Terrific. Everybody's here. First item on our agenda is the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Yes, Madam Chair, I move to approve the agenda for this evening's meeting of January 14th here at the Town Hall.
And do I have a second?
I second that, and in the same breath, I move to strike item 13B, subsection 4, regarding severability in the charter. There was an oversight. I forgot to ask that to be removed.
And we'll address that at a later time.
We'll address that topic at a later time.
But for this evening, I think everybody will welcome a shorter agenda.
Absolutely.
All right. So we are ready to vote on the agenda. Mr. Krantz.
As amended.
As amended.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is for the vote for the amended agenda, January 14th, 2025, Town of Bel Air Commissioners Work Session. Commissioner Rutledge.
Aye.
Commissioner Chismar.
Aye.
Commissioner Taylor.
Aye.
Commissioner Chance.
Aye.
And Chair Edding.
Aye.
The agenda is approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Krantz. And now we have the Town Administrator's Report. Mr. Hopkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Robertson is on her way. She came. She's here. Is she here?
Snuck in behind you.
Yeah. Director Robinson's here now. Yes. Okay. So she's no longer stuck in traffic.
Congratulations. I'm glad to see you here and not in traffic.
Okay. I know we have a very robust agenda, so I just had a couple of quick things. First off, we wanted to, I believe the commissioners will be addressing it later, but wanted to thank staff for the 2 recent snowstorms. I call them snowstorms, although they really weren't that big of a deal in a sense, but they were. And police, DPW, everyone really rallied behind it and got on top of it right away, kept the streets, the sidewalks very much cleared. That's where I want to go with this next point is our sidewalks. I know I did talk to several commissioners. We fielded several complaints from residents and citizens about the condition of the sidewalks. So I thought it would be appropriate to just mention, as a town, we're responsible for those sidewalks that are ours, that abut our property. The other sidewalks that either abut a residence or abut a business in front of a business, they are the responsibility of the business owner or the homeowner. We do have fines and penalties in our code. While it's easy to say that, it's a very difficult rule to enforce and sometimes not necessarily fair because we don't know the condition of the homeowner who may reside there and if they have the ability to remove the snow within 24 hours. So having said that, we're very cognizant of that. We did reach out to several businesses who failed to move snow off Main Street, and they very quickly, for the most part, responded to our request, mitigated it. Several others did not. The warm weather kind of helped that along. We're exploring additional ways to try and find ways to help mitigate this going forward. The upside for us is that we don't see snowfall that often. The last attributable snowfall was probably 2 years ago. So we haven't seen anything. People have a tendency to not really think about it until it gets here. So we're trying to work on ways. So if you field complaints over the next couple of weeks from citizens or constituents who talk to you about this particular storm or the future, the responsibility of the sidewalk does fall to the property owner. And we will take means to try and find ways to get the messaging out to folks ahead of time so that they know to remove snow from their sidewalks. So, the other thing was I wanted to let the commissioners know is that I heard from Barry Suits. Barry Suits was the president of Maryland American Water, and I know, Madam Chair, you and I recently met with him and his executive staff. He has resigned from Maryland American as president. He has taken over the role of president of the Indiana American Water. Laura Runkle, his colleague, is taking over. I've met Laura. We've worked with her before, so she pretty much follows the same suit that Barry does, pun intended. She follows in his lane. I think she'll be a great partner to work with, but Barry wished us all well, thanked us for our relationship, and he is moving on to another adventure. So I want to make the commissioners aware of that.
Eddie, is she going to be permanent or is she temporary?
As far as I know, she is permanent.
Okay.
For the commissioners' benefit, if you didn't hear by email, we are back on for Hartford Night. After consultation with the Hartford Night staff and then my economic development staff, we opted to participate. So we have RSVP'd, and then we will be in attendance. We'll have staff there that night to staff a vendor's table and provide information about the town to relevant people who attend. And I think, Madam Chair, for right now, that's all I have.
Great. Thank you very much. In that case, we are going to move on to the public hearing scheduled for this evening on ordinance 836-24 to purchase property owned by the Mount Royal Management on South Atwood Road. Is there any member of the public who wishes to address the board about that particular single piece of legislation? All right, then we will close the public session at 5:20. Well, now we're moving on to unfinished business. And does anyone wish to give, the Reader's Digest version of this? Mr.
That's me.
Hopkins?
Yeah. Yes, Madam Chair, that falls to me. So I know that we've reviewed this with the commissioners in the past, but for the benefit of anyone new to this topic, Ordinance 836-24 is an ordinance to purchase a portion of land located within the Wakefield Manor apartment complex. On August 19, 2024, the Bel Air Board of Town Commissioners passed Resolution 1235-24 to approve a contract to purchase with Wakefield Manor Associates, care of Mount Rural Management Company of South Charter Road in Glen Burnie, Maryland, for an approximate .38 acres of property at the dead end of South Atwood Road that would allow for the completion of an emergency access road that is part of the Homestead Wakefield Elementary School project. Negotiations with the property owner were then concluded. Town staff identified the need for the site survey, and Town Council's review of the matter identified the need to have, as a follow-up to the resolution, an ordinance presented to the Bel Air Board of Town Commissioners to more specifically identify the property and memorialize the purchase. As noted, said resolution contained general information related to the description of the property. However, it did not contain information that would specifically describe the piece of property the town wished to purchase. In essence, we had an approximation of acreage and boundaries, but did not have a survey nor right-of-way plat to clearly describe the property that would allow us to meet the requirements for settlement and conclude the purchase. Between late October 2024 and December the 1st, 2024, a survey was completed by Site Resources Incorporated. On or about December 2nd, 2024, Site Resources delivered the survey to the town. Town staff subsequently reviewed the document and prepared the appropriate ordinance, which was reviewed and approved by Town Council. Now, what is not part of your packet, and I had a brief discussion with Madam Chair earlier today, was information that came to us at the 11th hour this afternoon, in that the county government will not approve the monies to complete this project for the school board. So in essence, the settlement agreement that was negotiated with the school board was that this road would be put in the school. We would purchase the property. The school board would engineer, design, and build the roadway to those specifications. Mr. Castley, in meeting with the school board, believed that the cost to the schools to complete that portion of the project was too expensive. The school board previously had an agreement with the county to potentially use the McFall Center. Mr. Castley believes that is a viable means to use as an ingress and egress for emergency access. My objections are noted with Mr. McCord, that I believe logistically that's a very difficult ingress and egress for continual emergency vehicular traffic. But I do understand the county's position. Mr. McCord and I had a very lengthy conversation this afternoon, and I appreciated his candor. But at this point in time, the county executive feels that the money that would be allocated for this project could be best used elsewhere. Having said that, I did have consult with Ms. Moody today, Mr. Small today, as well as our attorneys with the McLeod Law Group. It is still our collective belief that we should continue through and purchase the property. We do know that there will be future iterations of other schools. There will be future opportunities where maybe this property could be of value. And even in discussions with Mr. McCord, we both identified that if the McFall Road access is not feasible and determined later to be not feasible, that this would be an alternative option for us, and which, if we owned the property, would be far less of a problem for us in several years, and obviously far less expensive. So with that in mind, ladies and gentlemen, I, as the town administrator of the town staff, are recommending Ordinance 836-24 be approved by the Bel Air Board of Town Commissioners, and I'm happy to take any questions relevant to the discussion I had today. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hopkins. Any questions for Mr. Hopkins?
I don't have any questions. I just want to agree with Mr. Hopkins. The leadership in any one of these branches could change. The situations, the practical circumstances could change. The lived experience of attempting to use McFall as an ingress-egress could change, and that will change, we know, because
Yes,
we
sir.
will have lived experience in a couple months. So I think, as Commissioner Rutledge wisely stated when we took this issue back up, months ago now, When is the next time that we're going to have an opportunity to fall in our lap to purchase this piece of property? And so it seems to me wise to move forward, despite that regrettable and unfortunate
Yes,
evolution.
thank you.
I would like
So-
to say that I initially, when we talked about the road and that the idea of using the McFall Center access, I was 100% against that idea, and just because of the traffic, the amount of traffic that goes in and out of that facility, the kids that use the Boys and Girls Club facility attached to the McFall Center, that's just asking for a major disaster. So I think that we have no other choice, and the best choice is to move forward purchasing the property.
So Eddie, question on, so the property's really not of much use except for that roadway? I mean, if the roadway never gets put in, what's that property? We're just owning a little strip there.
I
mean, I'm just-
no, that's a legitimate question. I can't predict the future. I don't know. I don't know whether it could essentially become a pocket park or whether it would just be a small wooded area. It's really difficult to say. I do know that there are, and Mr. Small can correct me if I'm wrong, I do know that there are future plans to rehab or build a new middle school with Bel Air at the Bel Air complex in a couple of years. This may figure into the comprehensive plan of an actual through roadway through the complex that was originally proposed. There's an option for that. I think if the McFall Center fails, there's an option for that. But
Okay.
back to your original point, sir, you're right. It's 0.3 acres of nice trees and grass for right now.
Right. Okay.
So, Madam Chair, if I could just add my 2 cents, I continue to maintain my position that the opportunity to be able to have a landowner willing to subdivide off that strip, in my limited experience of, 40 years, I guess, by now, of dealing with these type of issues and watching things with regard to land acquisition, buying and selling many pieces of property involved in many subdivisions, that this opportunity is not going to come back, and that if 10 years from now, we guaranteed there's going to be a different county administration 10 years from now, and because of term limits. So 10 years from now, if it's needed, the amount of money that we're spending on this is going to seem like a very small amount of money, number one. Number two, if we can't learn from the lessons of our brothers and sisters across the United States as different unexpected or even potentially expected events occur, with whether it's a terrorist attack, whether it's a mass shooting, whether it's a fire, one thing ought to be clear, that providing our first responders with the very best opportunity to respond quickly to an emergency should be paramount in everybody's mind. I can't get into the heads of people that think that it's just another budgetary consideration that you can shift funds from point A to point B. This should be, if it's not clear before Christmas, it should be clear today, the #1 priority of local government. So I fully support the acquisition of this property. Thank you.
I won't belabor the point, but I agree with the rest of the commissioners. We have an opportunity, we should take it, and we will have done nothing, if we've done nothing else, we've banked it for future use. So with that being said, if
Thank
there's any other discussion, in that case, may I have a motion?
Yes, Madam Chair. I move that ordinance number 836-24 for the purchase of real property located at the intersection of South Atwood Street with West McFall Road be approved by the Board of Town Commissioners.
And do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Mr. Krantz?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is for the vote on ordinance 836-24. Commissioner Rutledge,
Aye.
Commissioner Chismore,
Aye.
Commissioner Taylor,
Aye.
Commissioner Chance,
Aye.
and Chair Eddy.
Aye.
The ordinance is approved. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Hopkins. I know it was a long time getting to this point, but we're here.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right. Our tentative agenda for our town meeting, which will be held Tuesday, January 21st, here in Town Hall at 7 p.m. First, we will have the presentation recognition from Mike Blum for the 2024 Bel Air Christmas Parade. It doesn't do enough really to give him a proclamation. He is such a wonderful blessing to the town, all that he does, not just in the Christmas parade, but everything else. The 4th of July parade, he's a real treasure that we have. So we'll be taking care of that on the 21st. Anything else on that one? No? All right. Under new business on the town meeting, we will have Resolution 1244-25, the Hartford County 2023 Amended Annual Growth Report. Mr. Small, this is you. I know you emailed that around to everybody. And again, my question would be, the law doesn't require us to vote on this, right?
The way our code works, it does say that you have to accept it.
Okay, we have to
We can
accept it.
revise the code. It doesn't,
Okay, it still says accept. I
It
know
does
some
still
of, some
say.
of these reports that we just get,
Yeah.
and some of them we have to accept. So this is one of the ones that our code says accept.
yeah.
Okay.
And I'll add that Havre de Grace and Aberdeen, it's just basically filed with them. And they just
Yeah.
hand
I
it
think
out.
that's
There's
probably
no
what
vote
state
on them.
law says, that it's just like filed, because it's really informational. We don't have any input into the report.
We're doing
We
an
can't
extra
change it
step.
or do anything, so it is what it is. All right. Any questions for Mr. Small about that? Could you just tell me, I don't recall, and I know I saw the report, as far as the schools that projects from the town would feed to, how many of them are over capacity?
Only one, and that's Homestead Wakefield.
Okay,
and
which will be
Once the new
cured.
facility opens next year,
Right.
it will be no
Fixed.
longer.
All right, great news.
Mr. Small, I've just been piqued by that line of questioning. Do you remember how far that drops below the cap?
Goes down to 100 even,
Okay.
100%.
I like that.
And the way that the capacity kind of varies, it depends on what happens at other schools, whatnot, but sometimes it can go even further down or it
Right.
can go back up a little bit.
Certainly better than where we are.
Yes.
So we'll take that.
For sure. And it'll be a lovely new school for everybody to go to school in. All right, next,
Excuse me
sorry.
for 1 second. Kevin, what is the opening date for Homestead Wakefield School?
I don't have that right in front of me. I believe that the school itself will open fall of next year. Yeah,
that's what I remembered as
Yeah.
well.
When?
fall.
I'm sorry, what?
fall of actually this year, fall of this year.
Of this year.
And then they still have to do the fields where the existing Homestead building is located, so that'll still be under construction.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else for Mr. Small? All right, then we will have the Rockfield Manor Sprinkler Design Contract. Mr. Klein, is that you?
Yes, it is. Thank you, ma'am. About 2 months ago, we learned that the building permit for the addition to Rockfield Manor was disapproved, the result of not having a sprinkler system designed for the new addition, as well as older portions of the facility. So what we decided is that we would go ahead and design a sprinkler system because we did not want it to go without one, because we wanted to meet the International Fire Code. We reached out to KCI Technologies and are able to piggyback on a contract with Howard County to design a sprinkler fire protection system for Rockfield Manor House. There are some things that make it a little more difficult in the fact that it's a historic building. It's 125 years old. Another problem with the design is the fact that it's about 900 to 1,000 feet away from the nearest water line, which is served on Ewing Street. So that makes it a little harder as well. So the price to go into a contract to design and basically go through the whole process is $47,572. Just to make everybody clear, half of that expense will be shared by the Rockfield Foundation. Is there any questions regarding that?
That's just the design cost, not the
That
cost?
is just a design.
Wow.
Yes. During that design process, we are going to put on our thinking caps with KCI and try to come up with the best solution that meets the International Fire Code that is the cheapest way to handle it. Right now, they're requiring an 8-inch line from Ewing Street to put in a fire hydrant on the premises. That's what the code requires. So we're going to really have to look into our crystal balls and try to come up with the best thing possible to make the project cheap as possible. Eddie and I just felt that we could not overlook it. The county would not overlook anything. They said that it had to meet the code, and Eddie and I agree that we're not going to give them a waiver, and we're going to stick to the code for safety reasons.
Eddie, our local fire expert, wouldn't agree to something that, you
Yeah.
know? Okay, I get that.
Yeah.
Really, the expense is because it's so far away.
Yeah,
from
and
any
again,
water.
you're dealing with a retrofit of an historic building. That makes it really hard because a lot of the plaster walls are in there, and that's gonna have to. You don't know what's behind the plaster walls all the time. They have 3-dimensional scanners that they can kind of tell where other utilities are behind the wall, electric, plumbing, and so forth like that. That will help assist. One of the methods that could have been used that absolutely made it cheaper would have been to install the actual piping on the exterior of the wall rather than put it inside the wall. And because the aesthetics of the facility, that it's used for weddings and so forth like that, it was discussed that we would try to make it very nicely done.
So is the plan to put it on the outside or the inside? Or you don't know
No,
yet?
behind the walls.
Behind the walls?
Yes,
Okay.
instead of running
the
walls
outside.
on the outside of the wall. Piping on the outside.
I was going to ask about the cold and water kind of
Yeah.
can be dicey there. No. Yeah, clearly we cannot build something that doesn't meet fire code where
Yeah.
we're going to have
Yeah.
large groups in there. That's just
And
not responsible.
this kind of got thrown in our lap, and we got to deal with it, and we got to deal with it. Time is of the essence. They would like to try to get that facility back in business by July of next year, so it's going to take about 2 to 3 months to design, and then we got to work real quickly to install it. So
And do we have any kind of guesstimate on the cost?
we do not, but we will
We will
once
have to
this
design.
design is completed.
And do we know, would there be cost sharing on the cost of it?
Absolutely. It's a
Okay.
50% cost share on everything.
Okay.
The design and the installation.
All right.
Madam Chair, if I may, as part of the lease agreement that Ms. Thompson and I worked on with Rockfield, and in fairness to Rockfield, when the lease started, I don't think Rockfield anticipated the sprinkler system being needed. Steve brought, and then there was, then as it became unfolded, there was questions as to what part of the building would be sprinklered and what wouldn't be sprinklered. Steve and I had long conversations and eventually decided on the path that we've chosen now. In completing the lease agreement with Rockfield, the brand-new lease, which was just signed several months ago, we added that in, 50%. It's not specified for design, but design, engineering, and the building of the sprinkler system would be 50% would be handled by us and 50% by Rockfield Foundation. So that is written into the lease.
Just to add, the foundation is aware of the cost, and they are definitely interested in pursuing further at this time.
And so as not to be overwhelming them with cost, Ms. Moody and I have discussed that we can front-load the cost for them and work out reimbursement plans with them, so it's not an overwhelming cost, since it was unexpected.
All right. Anyone have any other questions for Mr. Klein or Mr. Hopkins?
Steve, isn't there water out on 22? Why do we got to go all the way to Ewing Street?
I don't believe there is the water out on 22.
Really? There's no
Yeah.
hydrant? There's no hydrants along 22?
No, I believe it goes on the other side of the road,
Oh, on the Shamrock
side.
development side
Yeah.
of the road.
Yeah, and
Okay.
under 22 would be more probably
Or
just as
probably just,
expensive.
yeah, if not more. Okay.
Yeah. Another option was to go down to try to hook up to the water line that services the comfort facility that we have there, but it wasn't large enough. And the required pressure to pump it back uphill would have been too much. Yep.
All right, be interesting to see what that design, what the total cost is.
I'm not sure interesting's the word I would use.
Yeah, well,
It, we are,
Concerning.
we are gonna try to
Concerning.
offset some of the costs by doing some of the excavation and so forth for the piping that goes in and so forth like that to minimize that
in-house.
portion of the cost.
We appreciate that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure Rockfield Foundation will as well.
Yes.
They will be on our next work session to give the commissioners an update on the project. They're scheduled for the next work session.
I've seen some of the initial drawings, and it really will be, it will look appropriate, and it will be a huge boon to them as far as events, because they won't have to worry so much about weather, thunderstorms, wind, that sort of thing with the tent. Also, it's chilly in there in the winter, so it'll be terrific for them, but I'm sure they were not anticipating this cost, and with the design cost being $47,000, I'm concerned with what the actual cost will be of the project, but we will wait to see that.
Definitely think if it was a brand-new building, that it didn't need to be retrofitted and so forth, if it had been planned from the very beginning, it would have been cheaper. I think that really elevated.
Yeah, of course, the cost of bringing water to it is not cheap, putting a hydrant in and a big line, so. All right, well, we'll look at that on Monday and cross our fingers and hope for the best for the actual cost of the project. Now we have for discussion, both next week and this evening, ordinance 837-24, amending Article 7, 14, and permitted use tables of the development regulations as related to mixed-use centers in Chapter 165 of the Town Code.
This was presented before, tabled, and in the interest of going and receiving comments from Planning Commission and ECDC, which were emailed to you previously. If you want me to go back over the changes, I can do that.
Anybody wanted to? No? All right, and I know, you do?
No, I said I don't think we
Okay.
need to go over that, but I think it's.
I know
enough.
we all got an email from ECDC, the Economic Community Development Commission, which was dated the 13th on both of these ordinances, so we do have that. I know I don't think the Planning Commission actually sent us anything in writing, did they, Steve?
Kevin you just sent that out yesterday?
I believe, yes.
Yeah,
Monday.
yesterday.
Yeah.
About the mixed use. I mean, about those two resolutions, and I think everybody got them, correct? Send out to
Yeah.
all the commissioners?
I don't believe I got that.
I did not see it if I got it.
Oh.
I didn't see in my email.
I
think I sent it to you
saw
for you
the
to forward.
ECDC.
Yeah.
Okay. We all got the ECDC,
Okay.
but we did not all get the Planning
I
Commission.
can make copies if you'd like, but
I think
Yeah.
that would be terrific if we
Right.
could all have a copy in front of us for right now.
Right.
I did watch the live proceedings of Planning Commission, but it would be nice to see their distilled thoughts as well.
Agreed.
We're going to wait for Kevin? Okay. I mean, in a nutshell, what they had said on the mixed-use ordinance was that, and again, this was pretty much an attempt to codify what they had proposed for, or what they had agreed to on the mall project, which was, 50% would be for for use in the zone that it was designated for, and at least 50% type of thing. They agreed with that, and they said that they would like to apply the statement to the definition of mixed use to effectively control density and create a strong link between development review and the intent of the plan. So that's what they felt, that this would provide that link. The other.
So Steve, that's on the ordinance that we're going to talk about next, 837-24,
Mixed use,
mixed
yeah.
use. And
Oh, I'm
I
sorry,
think
we're-
right now
we're
we're
on-
talking about the density limitations.
I thought we were doing
we're on mixed
37.
use.
We're-
No,
Okay.
we're on mixed use.
All right,
Yeah,
I'm
we're on
confused.
mixed use.
Okay. All right, we're on mixed use. Okay,
We were
fine.
going to do them in
37,
numerical order,
Yeah,
just.
thank you for clarifying that.
I mean, in the bottom line, in essence, they were pretty good with all of that. The one thing that they would like to, and we discussed it at length there, was how the mixed, or the shared parking, it said must, and they recommended that we change that to may have, address shared parking, because their concern was like with the mall where they have a parking garage that was set aside for them, that they should be able to continue to use that for that and not use it for the mixed-use purpose. So what they were suggesting, that they change that must have shared parking to may, and adding at the discretion of the planning commission.
So, Kevin, can you walk us through what tools that would give the planning commission as it relates to shared parking? Because one of the things I don't want to lose is the town having a tool to say, you know, in mixed use, shared parking is one of the essential components of mixed use development.
Yes.
So how would we be able
Right.
to preserve that good while allowing for the planning commission to say it doesn't always work in all cases?
Which is the addition of that one sentence, which is related to the, it talks about shared parking between all development types must be provided throughout the development. So instead, it would say shared parking between all development types may be provided throughout the development at the discretion of the planning commission. What that does is that the planning commission has to approve shared parking. The attempt with that was to take that out of their hands and say that it doesn't need to be approved, that it's within the performance standards, therefore it's a requirement. But they did note that there are times where parking spaces have to be reserved for this purpose or that purpose, and they wanted to have that flexibility. So it makes sense to give the planning commission that flexibility to be able to say, okay, all of these spaces are shared, but these set aside spaces. So that's
this would
their intent.
still have the effect of making shared parking the rule. It would just grant them the power to make exceptions to the rule.
I believe that would be the case, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
and town council read that the same way?
Yeah, yes, in the concept that mixed use does, by its nature,
Right.
Inherently have shared parking
Right.
and facilities. But Standard on Bond is another example where they have set aside tandem parking for the residences. And I know the planning commission's concern was with Harvard Mall, they have a dedicated, I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice for some reason, a dedicated parking garage, and the security that provided to the residents was something that the planning commission wanted to support if the developer wanted to do that. So it gives the developer flexibility in order to do that. So, yeah, short answer, yes, I agree with
Okay.
that assessment, Commissioner
Okay.
Taylor.
I appreciate that. One of my concerns is that as mixed use, and I welcome more mixed use in Bel Air because I think it controls both commercial and residential growth together and links them really together so that we don't fall too far out of balance on either side, so that we don't become a sea of residences, but so too our population is allowed to grow in a measured way that is needed to support those commercial uses. I think mixed use is fantastic. What I don't want is a bunch of developments that instead of being truly mixed use are really just two uses next to each other and the twain shall never meet. They're just availing themselves of the mixed use section. And I worry that when no parking is shared, we risk running into that eventuality. So as long as this is understood to be, here's the rule, this is the expectation, but giving the planning commission the opportunity to grant exceptions, I am in full support of that.
Yeah, one point that Liz, I think, stressed when we were looking at the definition is that the mixed-use definition have that portion that talks about integrated scheme of development. It's a kind of a key word to make sure that everything is integrated together. That's stormwater management, and it doesn't have to have everything, but most items. Parking, access, stormwater management, service, all that kind of stuff is together. And that's something that we don't want to have a development come in and kind of pretend to do that when it's really not.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
So, looking at just the mixed-use portion, the Economic and Community Development Commission also supported the change to the permitted use tables, and the planning commission supported the change as well. Would that be fair?
Yes.
Okay. And then both of them wanted to see must change to may.
Yes.
Fair enough? Okay. So
Sure that you're-
they seem to be on the same page and only
There,
have those
there is one
two
difference.
things. And what's the one difference?
The one difference is that ECDC did ask us to revise the 50% and 40% figures, both the hard cap of 50% being the starting point, as well as the wiggle room down to 40%. They would like to see
Okay.
those go lower. They didn't provide targets, but they would
Gotcha.
like to see them go lower.
Okay.
And just to speak briefly on behalf of the members, I think the idea was that 50% can be burdensome for a developer, and that as we see particularly a shift away from office space, as the market is trending now, I think Mr. Small made an excellent point about who knows where the market will be in 10 years. But where the market is now, this could have a deleterious effect on allowing mixed use to be built in the first place, because it could be difficult to hit that 50% commercial threshold. So they recommended that we go lower. That was me speaking on behalf of ECDC, and I think there is some wisdom in that. I appreciate the 50% hard cap because of the nature of the land use designation. We're only talking about land that is designated for commercial use. And if land has been designated for a use under the comp plan, and the comp plan is our North Star here, I think we ought to preserve that use. However, I am sympathetic to the argument, certainly, that perhaps we could go lower than 40% for the reduced share, if the planning commission sees some, really extraordinary efforts towards meeting those goals that have been put forth in the ordinance. So that's my 2 cents on it. I think that there's reasonable positions on either side of that, and it's about finding the right number that works for this particular ordinance. So that would be my rundown of that particular facet of this.
I mean, Jake, I agree with some of what you said. I mean, I think, like you said, it's designated to be commercial, so we should try to keep the majority of it in that usage, because it is mainly affecting the B2, or the, it really affects R0, B1, B2, B3, and the A's associated with the B2A, B3A. I think the 40% is kind of generous in going down there, because now we're not making it what the intended use was to be. If we want to do anything beyond that, and I think that should be part of the comprehensive plan and rezoning actions. Sure. There's a mechanism for that. I think if we go any lower, then we're circumventing that comprehensive plan and the rezoning actions. So I think this is a good compromise on how to keep a good balance between the uses.
And I will say to your point, Commissioner Chismar, I did raise that ultimately, if the underlying question is whether or not this piece of property, this theoretical piece of property, should be commercial, then really that's a question about land use designation. That's not a question about developing it as mixed use, majority residential or not. The underlying question is the underlying land use designation. So I'm sympathetic to that point as well. The counter argument that I heard and understand is that that's a much longer process, and can take up to a decade. So I'm sympathetic to that concern as well. But I would agree that ultimately, whether or not a piece of land is going to be used majority commercial or majority residential, it has a land use designation for that reason.
Great.
So I appreciate that.
And I'm kind of leaning towards that thinking, that if it's designated commercial, designated residential, then it should be majority that. But we have a lot of things to think about on this. And that is the essence of land use and always has been. And one of my concerns is I don't want to see, the town needs to have a mix of commercial and residential. I'm sure that if we just gave up on land use designations, people could build residential from one side of the town to the other, because that right now seems to be where things want to go. But I don't think we'd really end up with a town that we liked with places to shop, places to eat, doctor's offices, all those kinds of things, if we are so heavily residential that that's been my concern about the mall, really. I mean, it was always a huge shopping area. Right now, it is not. And I know they planned 249 apartments there, but I haven't seen a whole lot for the rest of it. And those are what I'm concerned about, is us losing our commercial areas, and people want to live in a town where they have places to go shop. My goal is to never have to leave the town of Bel Air, whether I'm buying gas or clothes or, whatever it is, to have it right here. And having Macy's close and having the mall be really, a desolate wasteland is a problem for our town, for everybody that lives here, and for people that live in the surrounding area. Not everybody really wants to drive all the way to, Towson or Hunt Valley. So that's my concern with giving too much leeway towards residential when it's a commercially designated area.
I just had a question for our Director Small, if you could just help me put a little meat on the bones here. I can understand the concept you're talking about, the big intersection there with the mall, and, after the apartments are built, then, what's going to happen to the rest of it. But what, would this rule apply, help me out here, because I hadn't, memorized all the plans. Would this rule apply to Main Street?
For mixed use?
Yes.
Most of what what Main Street is, you have to have that minimum 10,000 square foot of floor area, and most of the uses on Main Street don't meet that. So
You
they
have to
would not,
have that to qualify to apply for mixed use?
to be considered mixed use.
And is mixed use, is that a special development procedure?
Yes.
Okay, so it's an SD?
Yeah.
Okay, so with regard to Main Street then, is it the footprint has to be 10,000 square feet?
Total square footage,
Total square footage of
So-
all the levels of the building?
yes,
And right now, many of them are smaller than that.
yes.
How about the Lutz building?
I'd have to
That would
measure it.
strike me maybe
I'm
be
Kind of
bigger.
thumbnail it, I'm not sure.
I'm not sure. I mean, can you think of any of the current buildings on what we consider just the Main Street sort of drag of that would be that big?
The county office building at the corner of Cortland and Main might meet that. I think it goes all the way back to the alleyway, I believe, or close to the alleyway. Cortland and Main. At the
So-
corner of Cortland and Main.
So if you could just, and if you don't know the answer, you can look it up and get it back to us later. Next week, we're going to talk about this more. But my question would be, so if an investor wanted to buy, one of the, buildings right on Main Street, recently the tower was up for sale, say, and I know that's sold, blah, blah. But if an investor came into that and they said, hey, we want to put, want commercial on this floor, we want, condominiums on the second floor, we want rental apartments on the third floor, is there a procedure for that they would go through?
Yes, if they were over 10,000 square feet,
Let's say they're not.
if they're not, then it's basically permitted at that point, because you're in B2, you're an existing use. There's no parking required in the B2, so there's not really much for us to
So
review. at
just
that
to be
point.
clear to the public, because when people hear the term mixed use, that's a very technical term, is that correct?
It is, there's only 2 mixed-use developments that will be in town.
Okay, so, because I would be concerned about saying, well, like a building like the tower, if an investor had bought that and wanted to put a certain number of residential units, certain number of, commercial applications, say on the first floor, residential on the second or the third floor, whatever, this 50% rule wouldn't apply to them, is that correct?
If they were under 10,000 square feet, correct.
It would not apply to
It
them?
would not apply to them.
Okay. So a person could take a building like that in B2 and make it 100% residential,
It could if it was a smaller building, yes.
a smaller, okay.
Yeah.
And so these mixes are applying to a very narrow circumstance.
Yes, anything exceeding 10,000.
Okay.
Yeah, we have one that has been coming, I haven't seen any plans, but there's one that's coming in that's looking to go on Alisan, and that may meet that requirement. I just don't know yet until I see a drawing.
But a property owner doesn't have to ask to qualify as mixed use, do they? If it was more than 10,000, could they just go under the current use standards?
If they're more than 10,000 and
Or do they have to?
If they're more than 10,000 and they want to do development or change use, they have to get approved as a mixed use. So there's a lot of allowances in there. If they're already an existing building and they're just putting apartments on the top floor, and there's not much else, you're in the B2, you don't have to park. It's kind of almost pro forma that you're just going through the process to get designated as mixed use. There are performance standards. Some of them would not apply just because of where they're at. But yeah, you would have to go through the process. We're doing that with McPhail Crossing. McPhail Crossing just added their 4th user, or is going to add their 4th user, and that user makes them a shopping center. And so we came in and said, you're a shopping center, you have to go to the Planning Commission and get approved as such. And should not be a big deal. It should be a pretty easy process for them, but they have to have that approval because they have to meet code.
Thank you for that. I appreciate your comments on that.
To that end, Director Small, if someone wanted to come in and develop something greater than 10,000 square feet on land that is designated commercial, they couldn't just go in and put something that was entirely residential under a non-mixed use designation, correct?
If they're in the B2, is that what you're saying?
Well, anywhere in the town.
Most zones allow for multifamily or residential, so they would be able to do an entirely residential property in that location, yes.
Okay.
Now, one thing that I think you would ask a question a couple days back regarding what is the advantage of doing that when you can go all residential if you want.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things is that if the second ordinance passes, you're limited on your density. Plus, also if the second ordinance passes, you have a minimum lot size. Neither one of those apply to mixed use. You can do mixed use as long as you have 10,000 square feet on any size lot, and you can, there is no density limit as long as you meet the percentage requirements.
I appreciate you putting that sort of complementary nature out there, because I think personally, my goal at least is to encourage more mixed-use development in town. When a big development is going to come to town, I'd love to see it be mixed use when it can be, and so doing that, especially on land that is designated commercial. I should add that disclaimer. I think that's in the benefit of the town, both financially and culturally. I think it enriches what the town of Bel Air has a lot. And puts less burden in many instances on our existing infrastructure and services. And I think it strikes a happy balance. So anything that we can do as a board to encourage that development in town leans towards mixed use, I think is a good idea. So I appreciate your responses to those questions.
And my question is that 837-24, whether there's a carve-out for those that have already gone through the Planning Commission and received their approvals or not, it would not affect any projects that we're aware of that
It
have
would not
already gone.
affect any projects that I'm aware of,
That's
no.
what I thought. Just wanted to confirm that. Thank you.
Right.
So, Madam Chair, if I could just sort of add my kind of feelings, the jury's still out for me on this number. On the 50 and 40, so I feel like, I'm looking at, we've got the Planning Commission's recommendation. They're the ones that really are the driving force on the comprehensive plan and these general designations. I, also feel like, ECDC, their view on the economic picture, I have to give that some pretty heavy weight as well. So I'm feeling somewhat torn on that. I hear what everybody's saying, but I'm sympathetic to Commissioner Taylor's suggestion that perhaps we should consider changing that 40% number on what the Planning Commission could approve to be lower than 40, and with the top number being 50. So it'd be the special circumstance that the Planning Commission could approve something less than 40. So I'd certainly appreciate any further comments or perspective on that from the other commissioners, and as we continue to deliberate this process.
Can I add something real quick? And hopefully this will give you guys some insight. With the Harford Mall 50% requirement, that was something that kind of came out during the discussion of the hearings of the Harford Mall. And one of the concerns that I believe it was Board Member Coates had expressed to the Harford Mall folks was that mixed use was a pretty ambiguous definition at the time. It did not have any kind of balance or any real guidance on what uses could be introduced to make it a mixed use concept. And what happened is that Mr. Coates had said, hey, look, I'm worried that you're just going to demolish the mall and replace it with apartments, which has been something that has been echoed by several commissioners. And they kind of did this sort of diatribe during the hearing, and Mr. Coates said, well, Harvard Mall, would you be okay with 50%? Like, well, keep 50% commercial on the entire 33-acre tract. And they were like, sure, no problem. That's where that came from. So I just wanted to give you that kind of insight, or it was almost like a negotiation in the informal sense of a planning commission. And so they said, that's what we want to do. And that's going to be your requirement to maintain 50%. So it's not set in stone. You know, as far as the codification of that theory of keeping that land use designation, and they were making that decision based on the comp plan, because that's what that land use designation was for that property. So I just want to give you a little bit of background insight on that sort of discussion as it kind of unfolded, because I know some of the board members weren't on the board, some saw it, some didn't, and that's where we wrote it into the opinion. So if you wanted to lower it, I wouldn't see an issue with that, but at the same time, you don't want to make it so low that it's not feasible.
Or not mixed use anymore.
Exactly, it's not mixed use, and then if we're, let's say Harford Mall, I'm just using that example, not that it would apply. Not that it would apply, I'll say that again. But if you revised it to reduce it down to like 25%, but then, so how's the planning commission supposed to say that's consistent with the comp plan if their minimum is only 25%? So there is a balance to be struck, and I think that's obviously, you know, your job. But I hope that gives you some insight into that number, so.
To me, the 50% just makes sense, because if it's commercial, then shouldn't 50% of it at least remain commercial for it to be a mixed use? Otherwise, isn't it more of a residential project? If it's, you know, 60% residential, 70%, 75% residential, what is that doing in a commercially designated area? We need commerce.
And
I'm not arguing with you
Yeah.
exactly, it's just.
Whatever you guys decide that looks like, you know? So I just kind of wanted to give you that insight. It wasn't like they pulled it.
That is my concern, and it could be a terrific project, but it just doesn't belong in a commercial area, a 75% residential, 25% commercial. We need our commercial.
Commercial area.
Today, people want to build residential, and I get that, but what about tomorrow? What about in 5 years? What are we going to look like in 10 years if all we build are residences?
When I will say this, there's a tendency for the development community to kind of have a herd mentality. They're all headed to one thing because that's where the profit is. And then you end up with the latecomers not being able to support their development.
And that's what I think is going on right now. Everybody is rushing in the same direction, and all we see are apartments, and there's nothing wrong with apartments. But what if there's a glut of apartments? Then what do we have a town that looks like what? And what about all the people who live in the older apartments, move to the newer apartments? What are our older apartments going to look like? What is the pressure going to be on the rent there? How are they going to do maintenance? It's like a big rush all in one direction, and I'm just not sure that in 5 years we're going to think it was wise.
We need to strike that balance, and it's just like we did with the, our resolution on the property on Atwood. We're buying it now for the future, and I think that's what this is about is, yeah, the trend now is to turn everything into housing. That's where the quick profit is, the money-making thing. But what about, as Commissioner Edding just said, what about 5, 10 years from now? We have to keep that balance. And then I think this gives us that balance. And I think if we go below the 40%, I mean, we're kind of getting back into piecemeal rezoning.
One of the things,
You know, because you get, like you said, it's coming down, it's no longer mixed use, and it's no longer commercial, and doesn't follow the comp plan, and I think the 40 is a good compromise there, number. And, you know, the other aspect, I think that there might be anything that's a little light, is the conditions for which you can go to 40, about what do we mean by landscaping, expand the landscaping design and public amenities and stuff. I mean, that'll be left up to the discretion of the Planning Commission, but, you know, the way it's written now.
I think one of the things that needs to be said is that the Planning Commission is not compelled to approve anything below 50. They may approve it.
Correct.
So I think that it's up to the developer to provide a compelling argument that they cannot meet the 50% because of X, Y, and Z, and they have to provide that evidence to the Planning Commission. And it may mean that that text needs to get slightly revised so that there is a criteria by which you would judge that something can float below 50% to a certain percentage. In fact, in some ways, you don't even need that 40%. It's whatever the developer can argue is appropriate. And they would have to use the comprehensive plan as the basis for that. So, I mean, if you had 30%, I'm not sure that kills the mixed use, but 5 years from now, it could be there's no residential out there, and, you know, that it aren't kind of, and the developers are heading right towards commercial. Right now, you can't build office because it's just, you know, there's nobody to fill the offices. Could change in 5 years.
And that's another, I mean, I see even now, I read the headlines in the paper, everybody's ordered back to the office. So I'm not sure where it's all going to shake out, and I think we're in sort of a shakeout period. And I think the same for commercial. I know everybody, the money must be in residential because that's all we're seeing. But it was Christmas time, but you could not get into the parking lot from 24 in the Target in Bel Air. It was that crowded. There were no parking spaces, none. People
There were a lot of
parking-
spaces in the Hartford Mall.
There were a lot of spaces in the Hartford Mall. But if you go to that intersection, everybody's doing great except the Hartford Mall. Of course, there's nothing in the Hartford Mall to shop at, so it's sort of, you know, which came first, the chicken or the egg? I mean, people, I think, in this county want to shop. They have, you know, things they want to buy. Hartford Mall used to provide that. Right now, it's in flux, and hopefully they're going to bring in something that's terrific as far as what businesses they bring, what commerce they bring. But this is a county that, not just a town, because we're a little bit small, but the bigger circle of the larger Bel Air that's going to look to shop at that Hartford Mall, there are a lot of people here, and they have money to spend. So I'm hoping the Hartford Mall brings something that will, you know, satisfy that desire. But that's what we need as a town. We need places for people to shop.
It's likely we'll have a concept meeting in the future, near future, on what will replace the Macy's. I don't have all that information in front of me.
You know, that's really kind of a big, sad thing that Macy's is going to be closing, but
Can I ask you a question,
certainly.
Mayor? So do you support the flexibility to go to 40%, or would you like just a hard line at 50?
I think I like the hard line of 50 right now. If it's a commercial area, why shouldn't at least 50% of it remain commerce? We're already giving up 50% to residential.
So maybe I could ask the sponsor of the bill, Commissioner Chismar, what's the genesis of the flexibility to go to 40 in your mind?
We had discussions. I'm sorry, we had discussions on this, and I think it turned down to that if they wanted to go below 50, they would have to go to the Board of Appeals for a variance. And I thought that's what and that's why we put the 40%
Well,
in
yeah,
cost.
initially we did.
Initially, we
and
did.
then- but
We can't send them to the Board of Appeals
Right.
for a variance,
Okay,
because the criteria that Kevin set up with the amenities and that kind of stuff,
He means before the 40% was put in.
yeah.
If you only did
you-
50%.
right, if you only did 50%, that you could go to the Board of Appeals and ask for a variance on the 50%.
We originally did a variance to the board, but we couldn't add those criteria in there because it's a hardship. So how are they going to show that hardship? So we revised it to say they could go down to 40 based on the findings of the Planning Commission.
Right.
And that they would have to
Okay.
show, under the guidelines, we added guidelines to say they have to have certain development elements that increase the, I guess, desirability of the development at the discretion. And the concept is that, if they're going to 49, they'd only have to have one.
Yeah,
If
not a whole lot.
they started going lower, they were going to have to provide a lot more incentive for that to be granted. So they can't go to board, if that is included in there, those elements.
Right.
You cannot change Maryland law with respect to the standard on variances. It is what it is. You can't add to it. Does that make sense?
If we leave the 40% in at the discretion of the Planning Commission,
Yeah.
there is no appeal to the Board of Appeals
Correct.
to go.
Yeah.
If we take it out, there's the potential to go to the Board of Appeals, is that correct?
There is always a potential, but they would not have that, those guidelines would not be a part of that.
Right, the guidelines about having to have more amenities, have better landscaping would
That's-
not be part of the
Yeah,
variance.
correct.
Right, you either
So-
get it or you don't.
You get
Yeah,
it or
you
you
either get
don't.
it or you
So that
don't.
was, right.
So
that's-
I was just gonna say, the idea is because it's very difficult for a developer to find relief with just
Correct.
this 50%. The idea was that it would be wise to provide a channel for relief through the
Right.
Planning Commission.
Correct.
Okay.
A variance is
And-
not intended to be easy to obtain.
And
And
it's,
we would get
it wouldn't
something in
apply.
return
Right.
for a nicer project or better materials, landscaping, amenities, and things of that nature by going below that 50%.
Got it.
So that was the thought process on it.
and the connection to the comp plan, because that's the whole idea. That's where the 50% came from. So if you're going to say that you want to go down to 40, you got to show the Planning Commission that you're still in conformance with the comprehensive plan. Maybe not the land use portion of it, but other portions of it.
Well, that being the case, I do think that the phrase, provided the applicant demonstrates excellent of design and consistency with the comprehensive plan, I think that phrase needs a little work.
We can look
I
at
mean,
that.
I think you were indicating maybe it needs a little more
Yeah, we can
meat on
look at the
bones, a
text
little
if you
more.
like.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that is. I'm not, I mean, I'm not
Sure.
sure maybe, whether I think that should really defer to your expertise a little bit on knowing, what the Planning Commission would be wrestling with there. But then, I guess my follow-up was, okay, so where did the number 40%, what's the thing, was that just some flexibility or,
So-
To give them some flexibility.
yeah?
Yes.
Commissioner Rutledge, I think excellence of design, is your concern about that vagueness, about what that means?
Well, sort of it demonstrates excellence of design and consistency with the comprehensive plan. I'd like it to be crystal clear that that's going to be in the absolute discretion of the planning commission, or something like that, you know?
You could add that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, just to make it clear, that way it's not just some kind of objective standard that they could later say, well, you know, the planning commission abused their discretion, or whatever lawyers argue. you
Well,
know
and
what I'm
excellence of
saying.
design is a vague reference, but there's lots of vague references.
Well, no, I don't
in
have
there.
this
I know.
problem with the, you know, I don't have any problem with that, but my concern is just make it crystal clear that in the discretion of the planning commission, or in the judgment of the planning, something like that.
Yep.
As a prepositional phrase right at the end of that, would make it clear that, it's okay to be vague, because this commission, entrusted with so much authority under Maryland law, is making the judgment calls that the law has entrusted them with.
Right.
And I was just gonna add that excellence of design is fleshed out, because there's a semicolon after that sentence, which then leads into four subsections, which I think provide a pretty good guidance as to what excellence of design looks like. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, and that, what
They're
people
still
think
vague,
of
too.
excellence of design will change 5 years from now.
Absolutely.
Right.
This is the way
As well should it.
humans work.
You know, we should not be in the business of legislating specific decisions on development. We set down the code, we set down the law, we set down the guidelines, we entrust the planning commission to make those particular calls. So this strikes me as good, but I am certainly, I'm certainly in support of, we'll call it the Rutledge Clause, adding that prepositional phrase after that. I don't think that that harms the legislation at all, and I don't think that that's a problem.
Madam Chair, if I may just add one thing from the Economic and Community Development Commission, that when they were talking about, and Commissioner Rutledge, as you just mentioned, where did the 40% come from? One of the discussions that was had about perhaps proposing a reduction in those thresholds is that if you're looking at a building, and I understand what you're saying, Madam Chair, about the underlying use, land use, but if you're looking at a building and you're using a 40% as the lowest you can go, what if you're looking at a 3-story building and there isn't the, with the current trend in commercial, the use for the office space? So now you're looking at retail, commercial use on the lower floor, and now with a 3-story building, you don't have that option. You can't meet the required thresholds at 40%. So one of the numbers they talked about was a 33%, because then you could look at a 3-story building, look at 2 stories of residential with your lower level being a commercial use, still meet a mixed use, and meet those thresholds with the approval of the Planning Commission.
Thank you for that input.
Okay.
All right. Anything else that anybody wants to talk about this bill right now? There'll be further discussions.
Right.
All right. Moving on to ordinance 838-24, amending Article 3, 10, and lot requirements tables of the development regulations as related to density limits in Chapter 165 of the Town Code. All right, Mr. Small, you want to just give us the brief
Sure.
overview on that one?
I think last time we talked that the 3 zones that are of particular concern are B2, B2A, and B3A. Those 3 were considered form-based zones and did not have density limitations. What this bill does is it attaches density limitations to those 3 zones, and those are outlined in the ordinance. There is also a few other kind of, I can't say it was housekeeping, but one of the things was just to add a minimum lot size for townhouse development. That in a way kind of keeps some of that development out of the B2 area. The one thing that other kind of work or housekeeping measures were also added to that that bill, but I won't go into those. They're relatively benign. But it's basically attaching density limits of 20 units per acre for multifamily and then 14 for townhouse and then down the line. Those enable the B2, B2A, B3A to match what's in the B3.
I'll just kick us off with this one, with something that I think we've talked about a lot, and the board might be in some general agreement about. This is by no means an attack on your initial idea, Mr. Small, but I don't think that this piece of legislation is the right time and the right bill to tackle the townhouse lot size. I would prefer to see us take that out altogether. My concern about the largeness of that number essentially puts a moratorium on townhome development unless you can find 34 units together, and that's perfectly put in that 60,000 square foot lot. And so at this time, I'm of the position that we ought to pump the brakes on that piece, but that if there is a desire to revisit that, perhaps as it comes to those one-off developments, perhaps that can be a separate subject that we can look at with closer revision. But I don't think that it belongs in this particular piece of legislation.
I had this discussion with Commissioner Taylor, and I also am a little concerned about throwing this in at this time with this legislation, and maybe we should just take it out to be considered at a later time on its own. I don't know how the other three commissioners feel, but that was, there's a lot of moving parts to that, and I think it might behoove us to just consider that separately.
Well, just looks like the 60,000 is the lot size.
Correct.
So you're not going to get 34 units in 60,000.
I think he was applying the density limitations, so,
What's-
yeah.
Right, well, because of parking, open space requirements and all that required for 1,800 square feet, I think was just the size for the building that was initially in there. It didn't
Right.
include the parking and all the other aspects of the project that need to be included, so, and 60,000 was kind of, Planning Commission had some reservations about the lot size, a little bit on that.
They did.
The idea that Kevin and I worked on was about the size of the communities. Sometimes the small townhome communities are not well maintained, kept up to snuff, so there's some kind of look at what is that happy medium between, you don't want it to be too big where it's a huge, it doesn't have to be a huge community, but you want it of a decent size, so things like the HOAs or the community association or whatever that maintains the common grounds and all that can survive and do a good job at maintaining, a pleasant appearance of the community.
And I think those are all certainly worthy goals, although, coming from Baltimore City where there weren't any HOAs, but there weren't any common ground either, I'm
Right.
not used to thinking about those considerations in the context with townhouses. Townhouses are also, I don't want to accidentally make it really hard to build a townhouse development in town. It is often it was my first house was a
True.
townhouse, and that's the more affordable thing for beginners
Right.
in the housing market. I don't want to see us make that difficult or more expensive than it has to be.
I think if we want to encourage young professionals to access home ownership in Bel Air, the last thing we want to do is accidentally burden building townhomes. So that's where I come down on it as well. I think.
One of the things that this was being proposed really relates to the affordable housing state law. And we're going to have to tackle that at some point on other issues, considering that a lot of the proposed uses such as middle housing, we're going to have to look at. So that can be tackled at that time.
I think that might be wise, and I know the state has passed an entire package, and I think there might be more coming from the legislators
Always.
this session. But they just got started, so we don't know yet. At any rate, that's what I think is the better way to do it, is to just consider it separately
We can continue to study it.
and look at it.
Again, that goes down to the size,
Yeah.
the size of the lots, because that's an issue that we need to
Right.
We can study it more. I'm amenable to that.
Yes,
So does it-
I'm also in favor of this on this bill, that it be drawn up in a way that does not contain any changes to the townhouse development standards. That, that 60,000 square feet is 1.39 acres. And so, I'm all for promoting the opportunity for home ownership, and the townhouse is clearly
Yep.
a gateway on that. So I think that, and furthermore, the sort of the rationale behind this this bill, as stated here in some of the explanation and the preamble, was to address the lack of density limits in B2, B2A, and B3A. Yet we've got this massive townhouse change in all these other districts. So I would be, certainly in favor of,
Right. I think we've reached a consensus on that one.
Yeah.
Commissioner Chance? That's what I sort of thought. So, all right, that's great. I think we're all in agreement with that. That was one thing that the Planning Commission did have some concerns over, so we can address that later and take more input on that. The Planning Commission actually supported much of this bill,
Correct, with the exception of the B2. and I
with
kinda-
the exception
that
of the
was
B2.
That was a concern we talked about there, and we're kind of in agreement. We probably don't want to put those,
Right, and that was also a problem that ECDC had, was
Right,
the
limitations on the
concern about the
B2, on the
B2 zoning
density.
district.
right.
Yeah, so ECDC's concerns were a little bit more wide-reaching in that they opposed the bill in its entirety.
True.
So,
Right.
it's a wide-reach, more wide-reaching concern than just the B2, although they certainly did share the concerns about B2. That was central to their
Right.
concern.
Because they pointed that out specifically, and so did the Planning
They did,
Commission. And I
yes.
know I had a conversation, I think, with Commissioner Chismar about that. I think we maybe have reached a consensus on that as well.
Yes.
So, yes, I'm fine with it exempting it. My only question was, if the purpose of this legislation is to conform all the zones with each other and that there is a cap in all of them, and I'm not saying it has to be that way, but if that was the initial wisdom, would there be any utility in, I think I brought this up to you, Mr. Small, finding what the densest current use is in B2 and capping it at just above that densest current use, so that there are no non-conforming uses, and that whatever is the densest in B2 now becomes the capped density? I don't think that would create any heartburn for anybody, but it would give us something in code to point to say, here's our density limit in B2.
We could take a look at that, yeah.
I'm not saying that is the way to go, it's just a potential way so that B2 isn't the only uncapped zone, because we don't know what B2, that zone will look like in 20 years. I certainly hope Main Street looks much the same as it does now, but
It will.
we don't have any,
Right.
true guarantee of that. So I'm just interested in looking at other alternatives. But if the consensus of the board is that doesn't work, I'm certainly fine with exempting it too. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, I think one of the things about the B2 that is unique is that it's, one, so old,
Yeah.
and the potential to create the existing non-conforming uses was a big concern. But we can take a look at that and see what comes back.
Yeah, and I don't think anybody wants to make these things non-conforming.
Certainly
And
not.
I mean, that's not
yeah.
that was not the intent, and we kind of, when we drafted this, we kind of said, B2.
I think we've been
Okay.
informed by the Planning Commission and
Right.
ECDC, and further discussions that maybe the B2 should, at least, we can look at Commissioner Taylor's idea, which is one that's got merit, but Commissioner Chance, you also would be amenable to so we don't create any conforming uses, taking
Right.
B2 out and looking at, that's what I thought. All right. Commissioner Rutledge, you as well?
Well, just to be dense about it. So we're saying none of the proposed changes in
Unintended.
B2 would be part of the legislation? on this chart here?
Or we will also consider Commissioner Taylor's suggestion that we look at the densest
Right.
use currently existing in B2 and maybe consider using that as a cap.
So-
But he will have to look into that to let us know what that is, but we don't want to create non-conforming uses in B2. So yeah, B2 would not have any density restrictions or potentially whatever is the densest use in B2.
So the B2, what part of town are we talking about, Kevin, with the B2?
Main Street.
Main Street, okay. So what is the current procedure? There's no density regulations on residential in B2, correct?
No.
So how does the process happen when somebody comes before the plan? Do they have to go before the planning commission or you administratively to get their project approved?
Well, it depends on what they're proposing, but, yeah, they would go in the plan, before the planning commission if they're building something that is 2,000 square feet or more.
Okay, so what criteria would the planning commission apply to decide, hey, that's too many units? Or,
There would be no criteria that they would apply since there's no density limitation. They could look at now, one of the things to know here is that this is form-based zoning, so they could look at this, see the elevation of what somebody's putting forth and say, that doesn't fit. And, go back to the drawing board and come back in front of us again. That's actually been, done before, in years past. Most of the time when you're talking about B2, you're not talking about new development, you're talking about reoccupying existing development or rehabbing some structure.
right,
So,
okay, so.
different application.
I'm just trying to understand more about that form zoning. The current law is, it's form and function consistency with the the town or the.
Massing,
Okay.
They would look at, how tall something is, how bulky it is it right up on the street, is it set back from the street?
So if that were replaced with a density rule, would that take off the table their ability to say, hey, man, that's just wild, crazy, can't do it?
Form-based function still stays there.
Still stays there?
Yes.
This is an overlay on that.
Right, I mean, and I got a feeling, I haven't looked at the density, the highest density that's in the district, but likely it's gonna be way up there. Because you're looking at a 4,000 square foot property that's 20 feet wide that has a single apartment above. Well, I haven't done the math on that, but it's gonna be a lot, for density per acre. So, in a way, I hate to say this, it just seems like a solution in search of a problem. And I don't see a reason to mess with it, but that's not my decision, that's yours.
So you would leave it with no cap, just
No cap.
it's old and it,
I've heard enough arguments from Planning Commission and ECDC that they're starting to grow on my brain now.
And I think that makes perfect sense. I was really just curious about what that number would be. And
Yeah,
if
I
it's
am too, actually.
astronomically, if it's astronomically high, then that's basically the same thing as no cap.
Right.
And in that instance, I'm fine with, just making it less work on the department. But out of morbid curiosity now, Kevin, I really would like you to get that number.
I share Commissioner Taylor's morbid curiosity, but also his feeling that it's going to be a really big number, and we might as well just leave it with no cap and then not create any non-conforming uses.
Right.
In the downtown area, we certainly want to have things be retrofitted and reused, and we don't want to make it any more difficult than it probably already is, given the age of some of these buildings.
Yes.
Well, the other aspect we talked about, Kevin, was looking at what a minimum lot size, a density applying to a minimum lot size. So
Right,
if
you
say
could
you have
use
a-
the same thing that you're using for mixed use, where you say
Right.
you have to be over 10,000 square feet before the density applies to you. But then you're doing the same thing. You're almost.
Right, it's
you're-
just another
you're-
way of looking at it.
Well,
Or-
and
Doing the same thing as what?
hardly any development or property would apply, because there's just not that many properties in the town that
Right.
are over a certain size. No, I don't know what that would be, but it's just, like I said, I mean, why do it? So that was,
Right.
looking at that, it was just becoming very bulky to be able to apply something like that when you're not really sure if it's helping anything.
Yeah, the only property and looking at any of these concepts or approaches to looking at density in B2 that would really
Tire lot.
have an impact would be the tire lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the only large B2 lot in town.
And
left
I
over.
think Liz and I were talking about that, and we were saying, well, wouldn't you want that to be mixed use? Because then there's no
Right.
density. And then, are you forcing commercial to be part of that? Yeah. But that's, do you want one big apartment building there?
And I think a mixed-use center, I know I'm banging this drum all
Would-
night, but I think that would be an excellent addition to Main
Right.
Street. So,
I think it's the thing that makes the most sense for that corner,
Correct.
and it's
Right.
so underutilized as what we call the tire lot, but it's really a parking lot.
Director Robertson, I see a thought percolating.
Making a face.
I was just thinking about exactly, that's the perfect space for mixed use. However, going back to what I was saying before about the 40%, you're looking at, on a lot that large, you're looking at likely to put a building that's more than 2 stories. So then you need to look at that 40% cap, that if you are at commercial on the first floor, then under what's being proposed, you would not be able to have 2 floors of residential without additional commercial. So you're looking at a choice then of a higher building that can then accommodate, or keeping it at a lower height, right? Okay,
Yep,
keeping
you're
it at
going
a keeping it at a lower height, but allowing for less than 40% with approval from the planning commission.
I think that's a reasonable concern.
But I'm not so sure that lowering it to 33% is going to keep a building height of 33 at 3 stories. I think that just, you can go,
You
You'll
could,
just
but
have
you
more
could,
floors
it,
of residential.
it would allow the flexibility that perhaps it is kept at 3 stories. If you keep it at 40%, then there's no way it could be 3 stories. It would have to be higher to meet those thresholds.
How many stories is standard on bond?
5.
5.
And
how
that
many-
has
how
1
many-
story of retail service, and then 3 stories of residential, and 1 story of office. They did come back in and wanted to do 2 stories of office, but then pulled that.
Okay, so there are currently 1 floor of office, 1 floor of retail, and 3 stores of residential.
Right.
Okay, and the 3 residential are on the top.
No,
In the
office
middle,
is on the
they're
top.
The offices are on the top. Nice view of downtown.
Wayne wants his
Okay.
views.
So how does
I
that,
don't blame him.
how does that formula work out for that project then?
Well, because you have 130 North Bond next to it,
Right.
which has all that
Okay.
commercial, that makes up for the
So
3 stories of residential.
That perfectly tees up my next question, which is, would then the alternative be encouraging, sort of getting creative with the design here, which where you've got like, okay, you've got your main building here, and you'll do 1 story of 1 story of commercial, 2 stories of residential, but then you're gonna build like another little add-on over here, and that's gonna be more commercial to hit your threshold. I mean, is that what I'm talking through? Is that reasonable? Is that something that you could see happening? Would that be sort of the encouraged use? What do you think?
I think given where we're headed with the density in B2, if we're talking about the tire lot,
Mm-hmm.
you're likely to see all residential.
Okay.
One of the things that we could do here is split the baby and do 35.
Mhm.
I think you had suggested that to
35
me.
was my number, yes.
Yeah.
35 was my number.
It's one of the things to think about is that there's not a guarantee that 35% is going to be where everybody goes.
Sure.
They're
Yeah.
going to find what works for them. And sometimes that might be half first floor you might have some floors that are not completely the same use. So it's just up to really the developer to determine what that would be.
I am guided in this discussion in that, our best laid plans here, and certainly our goal in all of what we're discussing this evening, is how to best guide the town through its next decades of growth. But I'm reminded with what you've just said of Reagan's 9 scariest words in the English language are, "I'm from the government and I'm here to help." And so what we might view as,
that in my office.
helpful legislation may not necessarily be the direction that they go at all. And they may go in some entirely different direction and say that, 58% residential, 42% commercial is what I want. They may say, no, I need to get up to 64% residential. I'm fine with that wiggle room in there. I just think that protecting the underlying land use is a noble goal. So, but I appreciate that, and I think we're going to have more discussion on that probably at our next meeting.
I think more discussion on this is guaranteed.
Yes, certainly.
All right. So ECDC really was opposed to the bill entirely, wholesale, and pulled out the B2 zoning district, as well as the section that talks about projects that obtain preliminary site plan approval from the Planning Commission. They would not want to see that removed from the bill as introduced. The Planning Commission really seemed to support most of the bill. The townhouse thing we've already addressed, the B2 zoning we've already addressed. Other than that, it seems that they are in support of the bill. So, any additional discussion on any of the?
Yeah, I do. On, just now, we can just focus on the B2A and the B3A. That's what I'd like to focus on. And particularly with regard to the maximum density dwelling acreage on the multifamily dwelling. We've got 20 units per acre, 30 if it's 55 and over. So, for some time I've reflected on this 55 and over bonus, and here's my struggle with that. And being involved in a lot of estate planning, I get to learn the intimacies of the living arrangements of families. And one thing I've definitely seen since 2000 to the present, over the past 24 years in Harford County, is multi-generational living is the trend and the way of life.
It is.
And the wisdom of giving a bonus for a 55 and older community, or making these age distinctions on density, in my mind, doesn't fly anymore. I'm sure there was a lot of concerns about that, but if we're going to have 30 unit density for just older folks that can't have multi-generational living, which is the trend, and it's probably why the Amish have all their cash to buy up all the farms, because they make that a way of life. Maybe we could learn something from that. But I would, I would like to see then, if we're going to say, I don't want to give an incentive just to 30 units for the older exclusive units. What I'd like to do, and being in part of that, age bracket, I feel like I've got some right to say that. I'm just turned 63, but I'm like, look, I'm okay. I would be okay with 30, any age group, 30 units for any age group. And I think economically that helps, because one of the things, as we look across the trends of business growth and opportunities we have here, an opportunity with, the growing defense industry and the focus on high tech and things like that, is to be able to, I'd love Bel Air to continue to be the place where the up-and-comers come to live as they're, growing their careers and be the attraction point for that workforce. So those are my two main concerns. I'd like to start that pushback against that distinction right here in this B2A and B3A, and would like, Steve, for you to seriously consider that we allow the multifamily density to be 30 units per acre, no matter whether it's exclusively for older folks or younger folks or whatever folks. and allow multi-generational families to take advantage of this, and allow Bel Air to be a safe and attractive landing place for the workforce that we need in Harford County.
Yeah, I hadn't planned on attacking both the, you know, the over 55 group, because I'm not sure what the regulations are. Are there any other different regulations, performance regs for over 55 communities as opposed to?
Yes.
And that make the 30 density more?
Well, I somewhat inherited that number, but the thought behind that was that if you're doing 55 and older, you have to put in an elevator. Whether it's 2-story, 3, 4, 5, you have to have an elevator. You're not going to be able to, you know, that's not why they don't want to climb stairs. And 2, you're going to have less parking. You know, just not as many cars used by older citizens. And 3 is the unit sizes are smaller. You're looking at a majority of 1-bedroom units, maybe a few studios, maybe some 2 bedrooms. But that's the kind of reasoning behind the higher density for the senior housing. I keep going to elderly. I don't want to say that.
So is open space?
What did you just say?
Senior housing.
Yeah. Say it again.
I'll practice that.
I like
No,
it better
I-
as just over 55.
Yeah, whatever. Stephen, Jim, I agree with what you were saying. I think limiting the numbers for senior housing is a little bizarre at this point, I think. But on the other hand, it's more important that families feel like they can still be with their family, whether it's a 77-year-old with 50-year-olds or 40-year-olds and 12-year-olds. That works for a lot of people. And if we just say, oh, this whole section over here is just for people with gray hair, then it's a turnoff to a lot of people. And it just doesn't sell to everybody.
There is, in the
So-
55 and older, under the federal code, you are allowed to have a total of 30% be younger than 55. And that allows for caregivers, that allows for people who have developmentally disabled children who want to live with them, and it allows for the situations that you're referring to.
Thank you.
I think my underlying question about this discussion, because I think I'm agnostic on it as of yet, is I understand that the limits for B2A, B3A were imported from B3, the density limits, that is. Could you tell us why, to the best of your ability, because you probably inherited this too, why is B3 at 20 units an acre? What does bringing that into B2A and B3A look like in terms of the uses that we're seeing now? And is there wisdom in matching it to B3? Or would, say, 30 be in line with what we're looking at now? You know, could you just walk us through some of those numbers, what they really look like practically?
30 is relatively high.
Okay.
When you look at most of the densities in town, and we could go through that exercise, garden apartments, where you're 3 stories and you have a lot of green, that's not even close to 20 units per acre. But it's also not even, if you wanted to develop somewhere in the B2, you're probably over 20 units per acre. So the B3 was kind of assuming that you would have development of more than 3 stories, that it was probably going to go to 4. In fact, 65 feet, you could do a mid-rise. But I think the 20 units per acre is somewhat of on the high end of what most municipalities permit. But I can look
Okay.
that up and do that research if you'd like.
I'd be interested in seeing that data, because I don't want to put, I'm sorry, I don't want to put Bel Air out of step, either on the end of being so dense that we're, creating this glut here, but I also don't want to put us so out of step that we're really making it hard to build housing in Bel Air. Both of those are laudable goals. And I guess my main question is, we're coming down from, a no cap in code. I understand there are other things that practically cap it, but really we're talking about a practical no cap to something lower, and I just want to know what that would look like. It may be that the wisdom is 20 units, and that's in line with what other municipalities do, and that's appropriate. But I'd just be curious in seeing more on that 20 number.
I can look at other jurisdictions, and I can look at some of the existing developments in towns in town to give you a comparison. What does the Villages do? What does Seasons,
That was
I
going to
would
be
appreciate
exactly
that.
my
Yeah.
question
Right.
is, what is it elsewhere?
Wait,
So we're
you
not
want-
too far out of step.
You want to
one
be able to
direction.
look at it and go, okay, I can understand
Right.
what that
Right.
is.
You looked at
If I-
that, I thought Rowan put something together on that.
I do, I have it right here.
Oh,
I
you
can
have it
pass
right there,
out to you.
and like you said, I thought we were more, the 20 was more on the high end. And
Well, it was relative to mixed use, so, but that is something
Right.
for you to look at in the
Right.
meantime.
And I think if we're going to address I have that, I just found it. And I think if we're going to address the over 55, there's a lot of other aspects that we have to look at, because now you're changing, if it's going to be multi-generational, then parking comes back in. We have reduced parking for it, you said now. If it's going to be multi-generational, is that parking going to be adequate? Now you're going to be bringing, what the requirements are for over 55.
Well,
I think leaving that out right now would be, we could just leave that in there for everything else and then address the over 55 as a more comprehensive look at that over 55.
Now, I think now's the time. I don't think it's coming back. This is the time to discuss this, because the reality is the 30% federal rule does not cut it for my clients when they've got an elderly person, they've got the children that are in their 40s, and then they've got children. The 30% rule does not protect them, does not help. It's outdated, it's outmoded, and I don't care what the federal government thought when they passed that. Okay, it was just throwing somebody a bone. We're talking about whatever the number turns out to be on the density, whether it's 20 units an acre, 25 an acre, 30, whatever the wisdom turns out to be, and whatever the majority of the commission feels about that. Steve, I feel very strongly that, let's deal with this reality of these families in our community in this time, and the need to be able to have the housing available for anybody who wants to come in and fill the important workforce that we need to be filling here in Harford County. I mean, I was just looking at the Maryland demographics and the trends, and it wasn't that long ago that Harford County and Frederick County had almost exactly the same population. That's really an amazing fact. They, have way outstripped us in population, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but the reality is when employers are looking to expand in the tech areas that are being expanded on, and they're looking at a workforce in Frederick County compared to the workforce in Harford County, this is an opportunity for the town of Bel Air to step up and say, you know what, we don't need to ask permission from the county council, the county executive. We get to make this decision. We don't have to ask permission from the federal government. We can make this decision. And I think that we need to make the decision just on these two little zones of saying, hey, let's take a step in the right direction for multi-generational living and workforce recruitment. And I feel very strongly about that. I've given this a lot of thought over the last 30 days.
So Commissioner Rutledge, would your thought be whatever the wisdom winds up being on the density, match 55 and over to?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay. So it doesn't necessarily have to mean making it all 30. It's
No, not
okay,
at all.
Understood.
No.
Understood.
No, my biggest concern is to to just make that a level playing field for anybody, no matter what their living circumstances are, no matter what their age, and it's a bonus on economic development.
I would suggest that, because that code in, that section of the code hasn't been reviewed by the town in quite a while, because we don't have a lot of 55 or older communities, let me and Kevin take a look and see what the federal law is, and how it's morphed. Because I know when it was first passed, it was implemented pretty quickly in Hartford County to slow development in the development envelope, and it was successful. And there was a lot of criteria that were really, really difficult to make sure that everything was done properly to comply with the feds. And we'll check on that, because I want to make sure it's clear, like, if we have a separation, that this is 55 or older based on the federal law, that's totally fine. If you guys want the same match density, that's fine. But we can't have 55 or older, multi-generational, single-family.
Right.
But we can't have that.
No, I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
If you think I'm saying to put that as a definition, I'm not. No, I'm saying this is the argument, just make it in these two zones, because right now in the other zones, you've got the split.
No, I understand, I
Yeah.
understand. It's just, I want to check on the federal law, and then the discussion was, 55 or older or multi-generational, and the code doesn't identify multi-generational
No,
as a living arrangement.
this is a persuasive argument I'm making, Liz.
Okay.
I'm not.
No, I get it.
I'm not using that, I'm using that as a reason that I want in those districts, whatever the density is, I want that fair opportunity no matter how old or young a person is.
That's totally fine. I just want to make sure that we're
I
clear.
want it age neutral.
Okay, that's totally fine, as long as we're on the same page.
Yeah.
So I'll check the federal law and get back to you and provide an update on what that looks like now. It may not have changed. I know when it was first passed, Jim, and you might remember this, it was really strict. Like, the whole couple, both individuals had to be over 55.
Oh, I know, because my wife and I shopped for that, because we were looking at getting off of the farm and selling our farm and moving down to the Bel Air area sooner. But all the great places were 55 and older.
Yeah.
And then we looked at, what the rules were and stuff, and we just couldn't do that because just the philosophy I grew up on, was always, that the family stuck together and often lived in the same homes on the farms. We kept our grandparents in the old farmhouse as the generations grew up. It was a great way of life, and it was a great way of economic support. The only new and upcoming places in the Bel Air area were all 55 and older, and we were shut down because at that point in time, we were like 45.
And one project that we worked on that was in litigation for years was the Old Trail project down off the Gunpowder. And the developer of that, it flipped hands a couple different times. We represented all the owners. That flipped from very, very high-end, very expensive townhome style units to 55 and older, and it completely destroyed the whole development. They've only built 7, sold maybe 10, because it was so strict that kind of what you're describing, but it was also, we found that consumers weren't really impressed with that, because a lot of grandparents nowadays are raising their grandchildren, and they could not have those grandchildren there, and that was a problem. So, but I'll check on the federal
Okay.
law and
Well,
see how it is, because
I
it
think
has
that-
not been, I don't think we've ever touched it since I've been around, so.
Yeah. Well, leave it to me to bring up a new issue. but,
Not,
yeah, I
nothing
appreciate-
wrong with the work, Jim, nothing wrong with the work.
And we have quite a few,
What the-
I think, 55 and older communities in town, because there's Kings Crossing,
Yeah.
there's the one next to IBC, and there's the Gateway Project. I mean, they're just the three that I can think of that are 55 and older only.
Right.
We have quite a few homeowners or residents that are 55 and older, but those three projects I know they're kind of large.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't think English Country Manor is.
No.
I think
It is
they're
not.
Market rate.
It is not.
No, but looking at that would not negate having communities that were 55 and older.
No.
People might still want to live in just communities that are 55 and older, not multi-generational, that have children and the like.
Some
if we
people
change
do.
this legislation, that wouldn't negate having that.
That's correct. So there's a definition in the code of 55 or older housing.
It's just, right.
You would just be basically increasing
just-
the density of everything else to the same
same.
amount as 55 or older.
Yeah, to be clear, I'm only talking about as we go from a strictly form-based zoning on B2A and B3A, and now plugging in density for the first time, that only in those two districts we would be age neutral.
Yeah.
That's
On the
what I'm
move-
proposing.
Yeah, on the 55,
Why
yeah,
not
because
for
there's
the
no
other
other multifamily.
Well, because I think the other districts need to be taken up and through, well, I don't want to make anything non-conforming. I think I'd like to have a lot more input from the planning commission or something before I delved into that. But generally speaking, the planning commission was okay with the concept of establishing some density standards in these two districts. And what I'm just suggesting is, and sure, more research on it or whatever, but you can see I feel fairly, strongly about the analysis that I've gone through here. If we're going to lay out density rules in these two specific districts for the first time since form-based zoning, let's make it age neutral, good for the workforce, good for the multi-generational living that has emerged.
I think part of the reason we had that big influx of 55 and older communities was they didn't have to wait for there to be space in the schools. And so
Oh,
at
yeah.
that point,
Yes.
that was where all the development money went. So now we've lived through that, and now we're looking at, other things, so.
Right, and one of the things that somewhat halted that was the mortgage crisis that occurred, where now condos became much harder to purchase. So now, all those 55 and older, which were all condos, that's the only thing that's being developed now is apartments.
Right. Trends we see, and all these things pass, and our job is to sort of guide things for the future and make sure we're not all condos, all apartments, all commercial. It's and we're buffeted by like pressures that are bigger than the town. We can't do anything about, like the current mortgage rates. I mean, it's a factor in why I think more homeowner-based residential is not being built, and that's like something we just can't do anything about. The market will eventually fix it, I think, but it's tough for people that are trying to buy a house now, particularly that first house. So, all right, anything more on 838-24?
Madam Chair, if I can just make one more comment about
Absolutely.
that. We really got talking about the 55 and over stipulation in there, but I didn't want to lose sight of one of the things that ECDC had brought up is the unintended consequences of creating that density in B2A and B3A, that the unintended consequence may be that it would discourage private sector investment in Bel Air, which is not something that we want to see happen. We want to make sure that we are allowing for these projects to be built in a way that investors will want to come here, that they won't be looking for other towns to invest in because we've made it difficult to create that opportunity in Bel Air.
We certainly don't want to discourage people from coming in, particularly investing in our Main Street, but we have to balance that against, the residents that live here.
And Kevin, to that point, we're talking about looking at other surrounding areas again. I don't know if we have this in front of us, but perhaps that question could be weighed against just how far out of sync 20 is with surrounding areas, because if this is where everyone is, then surely this is not, we'll hop over to Cecilton where, it's easier to build. So that's something to be weighed as part of that consideration. I don't want to make Bel Air so strict that it's just easier to hop over to Havre de Grace because they do 40. I know they don't do 40, but you see the point that I'm making.
Yes, and I can do that for both multifamily and 55 and older multifamily. And one of the things that just to know, 55 and older isn't apartments. It's a way of it. It's not a development type as much as it is a condition of living. So.
All right. Anything else on this bill? In that case, we're going to move on to Commissioner Liaison reports.
I know it's been a long time since our last meeting, and we had the Christmas holidays in between. So I did look at the calendar to just see what commissions have met. And Steve, I know that the Planning Commission met on January the 2nd, and I think we've had a kind of a full report of what they did already. I don't know if there's anything else you'd like to mention that they did during their meeting.
No, that was basically.
Pretty
That was it.
That was the only on the agenda.
All right, there you go. And Jake, I know ECDC met on the 9th, and we've gone over a good bit. I don't know what else they did.
Absolutely.
All right.
We will be taking up vacant properties soon, but seeing as this was the important topic du jour, that was pushed to our next meeting. But yes, we've got the full rundown of ECDC's last
I felt
meeting.
that we probably did. All right, the tree committee met on the 8th, and I was in attendance. The biggest thing that I learned was that unfortunately Wayne Merkel is going to be stepping back from some of his volunteer duties, so I understood that he is going to be resigning from the commission. His term runs till October, and I don't know exactly when he's planning to leave, but we do have that coming up in our future, unfortunately. And he has served for something like 30 years on the tree committee, so it'll be a huge loss. He's a great guy with a lot of knowledge about what's going on in the town as far as trees and the history of trees, and he can tell you where the biggest tree is in town and all that. So it'll be a terrible, terrible loss, and he certainly can't be replaced. The other things they talked about was putting the tree application on our social media. If you live in town and you have a 4-foot strip between the street and the sidewalk, you can ask the town to put a tree in it. Sadly, many of our little strips are not 4 feet wide, but we're going to put that on social media for those that are lucky to have one. They're already working on Arbor Day 2025. They're going to take another look at the Major's Choice Oak, which is right on Shamrock in the Major's Choice development. It is a champion oak, and in the spring, somebody's going to come out and take a look at it, make sure it's healthy. Does it need to be fertilized, or it's any trimming or anything like that? So, and they're continuing with the Tree City USA, which Laura, who's here, is going to take care of all the applications for us, and that was pretty much what the tree committee did. And Mary, I know that the Bel Air Downtown Alliance and Cultural Arts met in like mid-December, like before Christmas, so I don't know if there's anything that you'd like to report on.
There really is not anything new there in terms of movement. I think the Alliance has been extremely busy with wrapping up the barbecue bash and that kind of thing. So I think that there's nothing exciting and new there at the moment. And unless, Angela, you think there's something you would add to that? I don't think so either.
They're working towards their 2025 event schedule and managing many grants for projects that they're doing, both with economic development projects, grants in town, and other events that they have coming up. So they're also working on their strategic plan. So those are some of the things that they
All right,
discussed.
we're looking forward to that 2025 calendar.
They're very busy, though.
I can
Extremely.
imagine.
And Appearance and Beautification met yesterday.
Oh, I missed that one.
And it was a great meeting. We had a full complement, discussed a number of things, including landscaping, cleanup around town, gardening, some of the new flower beds that will be going in, and looking really to the year ahead, and what ABC can provide for the town. They'll be thinking about their budget request, because it's never too soon to think about that.
Never.
And all the wonderful things that we get through their budget account, that make the town look beautiful. Director Klein, was there anything that you wanted to add? Yeah.
I think you hit it, Jake. Thank you.
We met for about an hour on the dot. I was very impressed. It was a very productive meeting.
All right, very good.
I'm going to go back to cultural arts for a
Certainly.
second. You will be happy to hear, I'm sure, that very soon we will have, as soon as the weather gets suitable, an improvement, in my humble opinion, to the big green box in front of the building. It's going to have a beautiful mural done
Oh,
on
how
it,
nice.
designed by someone here who is on the staff, and I'm very impressed with it. So look forward to seeing that.
I can't wait. I can't wait. So you mean spring is eventually going to come? Okay. All right, next we have the staffing update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At the moment, we don't have any jobs posted on our job line. We do have a police officer who has successfully completed the background checking, and due to a couple unexpected delays, he's going to start in March. I think that's right. So we're going to delay his start date, but we're going to keep our commitment to the candidate, and hopefully he keeps his commitment to us. We have a new hire in processing for Department of Public Works, and we will see what the future brings in terms of new job ads.
All right, terrific.
Yeah. I did also, moving along to appointed officials, the deadlines, I did hand out the chart. We don't have any serious urgency at the moment unless there's some resignations I'm unaware of.
I will check in with Todd Boyle at our February meeting.
Yeah.
Other than Mr. Merkel, who's apparently going to shortly be stepping back from the tree committee, I think that's the only one that will be crucial when he makes his decision as to when he's going to be leaving us. All right, anything else? I know we all got a new calendar, so we can take a look at that, and if anything is missing or on the wrong date, we can let Ruth know, and she'll take care of it. Anybody have any calendar items at the moment? I know we all got an email about MML in the summer, and I know Jake, Mary, and Jim have all responded, so that leaves you and I, Steve, as the slackers. We have to.
Just draw your attention to the budget listening sessions on the 15th and the 16th, if they're not already on your calendar.
They were on my calendar, so we have one tomorrow at 6:30, and then the following morning at, I forget, 10? I haven't looked that far ahead. 10 o'clock. 10 o'clock on Thursday, so budget listening sessions. All right. Those are the most important calendar items, the ones coming up in the next couple of days. So we're going to move on to miscellaneous. The Town of Bel Air Police are providing mutual aid assistance at the January 20th, 2025 presidential inauguration. How impressive.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, we will be heading out on the 18th, Saturday, 6 of us in total, representing the Town of Bel Air at this prestigious and momentous event of the 60th presidential inauguration, and headed down to D.C. We'll be staying till the 21st, and we have events planned for every day. On the inauguration day, we'll probably be out about 15 or 16 hours. So we're incredibly honored and humbled to be selected among thousands of police officers across the nation. And, of course, we're representing our wonderful town here in Bel Air. And I tell you, the group is very, very appreciative of the town commissioners for supporting us and our leadership, our director leadership, in sponsoring us for this event. We will be fully reimbursed by the federal government for regular time and overtime, for travel expenses, and for per diem, Lisa. So, yes, you're welcome.
I think now you have permission to go.
There we go.
Wear your long johns.
And we will be wearing long johns and have all of our cold weather gear ready. So, thank you very much.
Well, congratulations. It
Yes.
really is special to be a
Great
part
honor.
of that. It
Yeah.
really is.
It's gonna be cold.
Anybody want to question the chief about that one? No? All right. Historic Walking Tour Grant.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just prior to Christmas, I placed a request with Hartford County for funding to provide us with the opportunity to create a GIS-based historic walking tour. So our department, Economic Development, will be working alongside the Planning Department, both Laura and Kevin, to put together a story map that will be similar to our public art tour that we created several years ago. The tour will complement the existing paper brochure that has been available at the Visitors Center, and rather than just being a downloadable PDF or a paper brochure, this will offer a GIS-based opportunity for either the 11-stop 30-minute walk or the 14-stop 60-minute walk for historic walking tours. This will be an upgrade, obviously, to what we currently have, and once in place, we will be able to market it in conjunction with the public art tour, along with our events and shopping and dining opportunities, and we'll be able to put together marketing campaigns to allow our citizens to be aware of that. I think we have a lot of historic buildings and architecture to be very proud of in Bel Air that probably a lot of people don't know the history of, that either are visiting here or who live here. So we'll have that link available once it's finished. Our target date is to have that launched by April 1st, so it's ready for warmer weather. And we'll be able to have that link available in several places on our town website, as well as on the Arts and Entertainment District website. And we're grateful to Harford County for providing the funding for that opportunity for us. Any questions?
Sounds terrific. High tech, very modern. All right, anything else on the historic walking tour grant? And now we are at the bicycle pedestrian plan discussion.
Yes, and Laura's, while Laura's setting up, we had comments on the latest version of the plan. I want to be able to just kind of go through that, but I don't need to, and Laura will answer your questions because she's a lot more knowledgeable in the items than I am. But and what I'll do is I'll go through one at a time but it doesn't, some of these things may not need to be discussed in detail. So you would go to page 6, right? So if you look up in the upper left-hand corner, that is a reference to the 5 pedestrian-related accidents. We can expand on that. I'll let you take
Sure.
it.
So the reason I just left it kind of vague in the report is because much of the details are covered in the Safe Streets for All report. But we can certainly add a little more to the bike ped plan. Just to go into kind of detail maybe of where specifically those accidents were. One of those hot spots was on Bond Street, where you have Cortland and Office and Thomas all coming together.
So would you like us to expand on that in the report?
These are all my comments, as I recognize all
about,
my
yeah.
highlighting. Okay, so yeah, if you're gonna mention it, I think it would be nice to have it somewhere in a footnote or an endnote or something, so people don't have to look at the Safe Streets for All. I know it's there, and probably you could tell me what the 5 were, but for anybody else that's looking at it, it would be handier to have it right there.
Okay.
Okay, the next one down below is, according to Automotive Marketing Research, there was actually, I took out the firm name when we were going through and editing this. And this is lower left-hand corner there. We can add that back in, or we can just remove it altogether.
I really think that you're just gonna lose credibility with anybody with that statistic, because it includes children.
It includes
So it's
children.
really like, it's not really how many people don't drive. I mean, most people drive. They may not want to drive, but most people do drive unless you're a kid under 16.
Right,
So-
although it's worth taking into consideration how much of our town's population is children.
Oh, and I have no problem with that, but the way it's phrased, that like, this percentage of people don't drive is just, it's going to lose your audience.
It sounds
And I
like
think you're
it's-
going to lose credibility with them.
Yeah, I kind of agree. It sounds like it's of those eligible to drive, only 31% do.
That's what it sounds like.
That's
And
what you
I
understand,
figured it
not-
had to be kids that were included in this statistic.
So we can adjust the text on that.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. You say, that many, we got a lot of kids, as long as it's
Right.
something that says, recognizes that you're including children.
Right.
Because I'm assuming that that's talking about people who physically drive themselves, that statistic.
Yes.
So that's not taking into account children who do drive, because that's their primary mode of travel, because their parents drive them.
No, this would be people who actually are driving.
Right. And so that doesn't
Correct.
help us in terms of thinking about who's reliant on cars and roads and who's not reliant on cars
Right.
and roads. Because a lot of these kids are still reliant on cars, they're just not the ones driving the cars.
Right, correct. Lower left-hand, the next page, most comments suggest building new bicycle lanes, routes, that, and I'll let you.
Sure, so that's something that Kevin and I discussed, that we would, that I could elaborate a little better, not just in this section, but also to kind of give a definition earlier on to what is a bicycle lane and what are bike routes, because we kind of just jump right in. But also to explain too, that there's, that you could do things such as sharrows, versus having like a physical bike lane. So that's an area where I could elaborate a little bit.
So we can reword that sentence and reference some of the items that are in the appendix, which outlines what a sharrow looks like and what a bike lane looks like.
Correct, in Appendix E.
That makes sense?
Do we have any bike lanes in Bel Air?
Wait till the budget session comes. I'm going to be proposing some.
All right.
Yeah. So,
I can't see what my comment said, though.
you want to hover over that?
Why is it not letting me?
Somewhere it's in there. That was your comment.
There's my comment.
Mine is like at the beginning, it looks like.
Yeah, for some reason it's not letting me hover over yours.
It's the little one.
Try here.
Right.
There you go.
Yeah, there was some talk about, like, that was a specific, and I wanted to ask if anybody asked for a path through the Major Choice Park, because that was one of the things that's in there as a potential.
Yes, so we actually had a specific comment, which we do have the comments a little more more detail near the back. But there was a specific comment of someone who was looking for a connection, specifically all the way to Southampton Middle School, as well as even as far as Briar Hill Drive.
Where there's a big stream in there?
Yes, and that is something that we would have to explore in more detail as far as a stream crossing.
Yeah, it just, I mean, whether we get to that or not, my question was about that, because that stream crossing is going to be pricey, and there are roads and sidewalks that go over to the school, so I'm not sure budgetarily it's a good idea, but that was why I put that comment in there.
So a lot of what we propose in the bicycle pedestrian plan is meant for it's a long-term comprehensive plan. So it's the kind of thing where we could be looking at solutions that are as far out as a decade, and also as far as funding goes, are things that could be funded through avenues other than the town, such as through grants or, no, not in this specific instance, but in other instances potentially with redevelopment. Developers.
So on the right-hand side of that, final plan was produced for acceptance by the, we were writing this as if it was already accepted.
I know it, I read it, and I was like, hey, it says we accepted it, and we haven't even really seen it, so now
Right,
we
so
are.
it assumes you're going to accept it. All right. Next one's the temporary project, which was removed at the end of 2024. That has been removed.
Gotcha.
Okay. Now, here's the big one.
Ooh.
Paula was busy. Let's see. You want to hover over the one up at the top left-hand? Yes, we don't have anything more recent for those particular parcels or intersections, except for we did just get some ones for, let's see, Business One and Tollgate.
Correct, the intersections near Hartford Mall.
Right, because those were studied as part of the mall redevelopment. So we can look at those, although, you know, and we can include those if they're any different than the ones that have already been studied. Yeah. Yeah. One thing to remember here is we're not looking at who pays for what. That's what your job is later. We're proposing the projects that will be a benefit to the community. If you can't afford them, then you can make that decision at that
Yeah,
time.
I have questions about or concerns about, like, us approving a plan when we would never spend the money for this kind of thing unless we were like suddenly flush with so much money that we didn't know what to do with it, which is never gonna happen in our lifetime.
I
Well,
think-
go ahead.
I was going to say, it's worth noting that this section, introduction, is mostly outlining what was in previously published plans. So like this section is everything from the Bel Air Comprehensive Plan that was approved in 2022. So later on might be the section if there's projects that you think might be better for a later plan and not this plan, that would be a better consideration.
Is that why it says short-term 2025? Is the
That-
expectation isn't that this would be done this year, or is it the expectation that this would, when we say short?
That one, that intersection improvement, it was listed as short-term 2025, but
Okay.
there's, yeah. So there was an expectation there. A lot of times we don't meet those expectations when we're going through planning.
Is that an expectation as of 2022 or an expectation as of 2024?
2022. So under medium term, somewhat of the same comments.
Yeah.
Who's going to pay for
All
this?
of these are like, who's gonna pay for this and why, and partly why are we doing it? Because like the Major's Choice Park going through what's really a natural wooded area with a lot of wildlife in it and a stream with steep banks on both sides. Why would you put a bike path there when there are already roads and sidewalks to most of these locations?
You can, if there's a desire to
Mhm.
not put in some of these things, just let us know, we'll take it out. I just don't want to preclude a project that's a benefit to the community based on cost. Cost is cost, and there's a lot of things that would not have happened, but for the ARPA money.
Right,
So-
oh, I know.
You just can't, again, we're talking about things that we can't predict. So are some of these things ones that you would rather not see? Then tell us and we'll take them out.
And some of them may be, but it was like, I had to read this by Friday, and I think I only got to page 21. So, and there are a lot of projects in there that, to me, I would probably not fund or want to fund any projects where there are already roads and sidewalks to that location, unless it's something like, I don't know, US Route 1 and kids on bicycles have to cross it, but I don't know how you could put,
Well,
a bike path in there anyway.
in some ways, there are already pathways going through here because kids are taking them.
Sometimes there are.
And so they're not going to take the sidewalks because the sidewalk's the long route.
And there was a
If-
famous, like, I don't know if he's an architect, he was a famous builder who, what he would do when he built something like a college campus, he would not pave until he saw where the paths
Where the
were,
people were-
and then he would pave the paths. And
Call them-
I'm kind of like, that is a brilliant idea.
Right, and that's somewhat what we're doing here, except for, there's actually a pathway that comes off of the end of Jackson Boulevard, goes down into the valley and then connects with Southampton. We actually looked at building that when the townhouses were being developed and making the developer put it in. We couldn't because it's 1, floodplain, and 2, wetlands. We couldn't do it, even though there's a people path that goes through there. And somebody's dad or group of dads went in there and actually built a bridge over the stream. So there's a demand for that connection. It's just whether or not we want to put that on a plan. And that's
And those kinds
up
of
to you
things
guys.
I would consider, but generally speaking, if there's roads and sidewalks, I would not be looking for bike paths to go through a natural wooded area with a bank and a stream, because it's going to be expensive, and there's already like a pretty darn good, safe way to get there.
It's up to you. You guys are the boss. We're trying to put in pathways that people want to take. People go through Rockfield because they want to have a pathway or walkway through the woods, not because they want to walk in somebody's sidewalk in front of their house. So it's up to you guys. You need to outline to me what you want to take
I
out.
agree with you, Kevin. I think the natural pathways that people are making on their own are what they're looking for. So put it in here. If one day millions of dollars falls from the sky, then okay. But
Yeah.
at
We had
least
$11
we're
million
thinking
fall from the
about
sky.
it. At least
And,
we're
and those pathways
planning
I
on it.
would kind of consider, Mary. I do agree that, you know, where people are tromping and the grass is all dead and everybody, the whole neighborhood has taken that path, you know, I think that's certainly worthy of consideration to making I don't know what you're going to put down there, crusher run or whatever, because you probably, you know, you'll lose the pleasantness of walking through the wooded area if we make it too much like a street and a sidewalk. But I would certainly consider those. But some of these, I'm like, I'm not sure there's really much traffic anyway. I don't think those things exist in some of these locations. But I don't think we have enough time tonight. That'd be a long project to discuss each one of these individually. And I don't think tonight is the night to do that.
So this plan was developed by the staff?
Yes.
Okay. None of the other committees had any input on or participated in it?
Well, it was developed based on public input.
Public input?
and you
Correct.
can
So
go
we had,
through-
we had a public open house on.
In the Armory.
In the,
Armory?
no, that was Safe Streets for All.
Okay.
So the public open house for this plan was actually in the conference room.
Okay.
Here at Town Hall. And that was in June of 2024. We also did a pop-up event at the farmer's market to actually like gauge, you know, people that are regularly walking and traveling. And there were quite a few residents that I got to engage with that, you know, not just regularly walk or bike to the farmer's market, but all over town. So those were the two. We also had a Survey Monkey that we published and advertised on the town website, social media, and we got, I believe it was over 70 comments back, or responses back, and that was not a short survey. It was actually pretty long, so there's definitely a demand and a want for improved ways to walk and to ride around town.
I am also interested in the bikeways because I bought a bicycle last spring after not having
Oh.
one for a million years.
That's wonderful.
And, yeah, the town is very walkable and very bikeable, which is one of the great things about it. So I think we just need more consideration of which of these we want to actually consider. I just hate to put in everything and
Laura, can you give us a sense of whether people were leaning more towards, hey, I want more sidewalks versus I want more bike lanes?
Yeah, so I would say, so we had like a dot matrix chart, and we asked people to pick their top three priorities of which improvements they wanted to see. And I can actually go to that page. Here it is, question of priority. And so the top ones were new dedicated bike lanes, cycle tracks, shared use trails, side paths, et cetera, was number one. Number two was complete sidewalk network throughout the town limits. And the third most popular was to improve intersection treatment for bikes, such as green paint, bike signals, et cetera.
And how many responses did that get?
So the top one had 45. Second place was 29, third place was 20.
So-
And keep in mind that people could vote for up to 3.
Yeah, but so people at
Got
the
it.
public meeting and at the
Got it.
Farmer's
farmer's
market.
market could take a little dot and place the dot where they thought was the most important.
So this is the sample size here being folks who are interested in more walkability, more bikeability, right? Okay.
Yes, and then the graph underneath is pulled from one of the questions on our survey. Which of the following factors do you think would do the most to encourage bicycling in the town of Bel Air? And the top choice was to build more and safer bike facilities.
One of the things you'll notice in the town of Bel Air is that we have very good pedestrian connections. What we don't have is bicycle network that works and that is safe and is comfortable. And the county is now starting to create networks of their own. And one of them would be a connection to HCC, which is already in the planning and engineering stage.
And Madam Chair, as an avid road cyclist and a mountain biker, I don't necessarily take the trails from point A to point B for a purpose. I like just getting off the road, one, to avoid the traffic. The bike lanes Laura referring to are significant because I invited a large number of bikers to participate in the survey. The roads are safe reasonably, but man, if you can take a trail, it's so much more enjoyable and so much safer. You're not looking over your head and you're not getting pushed off the road by angry drivers. So some of the stuff when I talked to Laura and Kevin about this as we looked at this was not necessarily point A to point B as much as it was just enjoying the aesthetics of being out in the woods or on a trail somewhere. Just a thought.
Correct, and that was another question that we asked in our survey, was how people get, like, why people ride, why people walk, and a huge percentage said for recreational purposes. So it's very important, not just from a point A to a point B, but just to be able to get out and enjoy the town, enjoy the woods and trails.
Most people are not walking or riding to go to shopping. They're not going out of necessity, they're going out of pleasure. So what do you want me to do? What do you want us to do? What do you want Laura to do? I mean,
My concern with this was us saying we approved this and having things that, like, we want this in 2025, we want this in 5 years, we want this in 10 years, and I'm not so sure that some of these things we want. I mean, I'm really mostly familiar with the Major's Choice area, and to put a trail from the end of Major's Choice Drive to Hickory, I'm like, why? I mean, it's gonna be costly, and I just don't think it's really all that necessary. I mean, I'm gonna try the Mont Pas Trail because I also would like to ride without traffic because cars terrify me. And I've had no bad incidents with people driving. They're all very polite, but still, a minor accident on a bicycle is not a minor accident for the person on the bicycle or the motorcycle. So I just don't see that any of these are going to provide that sort of an experience. They're going to provide another way for you to get to Southampton when there already is a way. That provides you another way to get to Hickory from Major's Choice when there already is a way. It's not really providing a bike-safe place to ride, and I'm not sure that we can do that in town because I'm not sure where we would put it.
I think what you need to do is to look at this in terms of whether or not it meets a need or a desire. There is no way to get from Major's Choice to Hickory Avenue unless it's like you have to take the long way around. This would provide a very quick and easy way to walk or ride through for a relatively short distance. I'm not saying you have to do that, but you guys need to tell me and to tell Laura what you want so that we can fashion this bicycle pedestrian plan correctly. Also, I understand cost is a big deal, but you're going to tackle cost when it comes around to actually implementing the improvement. There is no plan around here that will do all of these. There's no plan that we've ever done that has done everything that we proposed. So we have a strategic plan that just ended. Probably a third of those initiatives have not been done. So do keep that in mind. You're creating a menu and then you're checking it off as you go, and there's likely not going to be all of them checked off at the end of 10 years. So think about that in terms of how you want to move forward, and I do need some direction. I'm sorry, Laura needs some direction.
And we're doing, is this a requirement for Bike City USA or like,
Nope. It's just a part of planning.
Just a part of planning, okay,
It's why we do what we do. It's why you're paying me the salary.
all right.
I did want to point out, if it was okay, now, this map, as you can see, I zoomed in, the resolution's not great, you have to forgive that, but where, my cursor is where that Major's Choice connection is. And you can see all the red is our beautiful existing sidewalk network. But if you lived over here and you wanted to try and get to this part of Hickory, there's not really a good way around. There's not really a good way here. There's a big fence. There's now a fence here. There's a fence over here. So there's not even really any way that you can, bushwhack to get through. Unless you like hop some 6-foot tall fences.
In the other direction. Even I can ride my bike from my house to there and back. So I'm just like, why would you do that? But
Again, it's all priorities.
yeah.
You got to prioritize the projects. Not saying it's not a valid project to put on the list, it's just where does it stand on the list?
Yeah.
Correct,
Things
and
like that.
I do want to point out, because I shared your concern, Paula, that I didn't want to put specific dates on things. So the one place where I do have a date in our action plan is for ongoing efforts. But then as you get into the other sections, this is as properties are redeveloped. And then short-term, medium-term, long-term improvements that aren't necessarily set to, we're going to do this specific thing in 2025.
Right.
Yeah, one of the things that will happen is as developers come in and develop a particular property, the first thing, and this is when you looked at the mixed use, all those little things where people will reference, we're going to look at that. There's a reason there's a connection from Gateway to Monpaw, because it was on our comprehensive plan under bicycle connections or pedestrian connections. So it's there. We can then say, developer, you have to provide this if they have open space requirements, et cetera. This would be the same thing. If you come through, somebody comes through and they want to develop a particular piece and there's a pathway going through there, that's what they have to provide. So it's not necessarily the town paying for it, because almost all of these are going to be at least half or a strong portion of it will be grant funded. So I just need direction.
I'm happy to meet with you all at another time and go and answer all your questions, go over the plan in a little more depth, whatever you would like to do.
I personally want to forget about how much it's going to cost. What, if you're going to look in a crystal ball and say, this is what I'd really like to have one day, that's what that should be.
Right, so if you want to, go ahead.
No matter how much money, no matter how we get it, whether it's grant, whether it's a developer, whatever, this is what we really would like to have, period. I wouldn't eliminate anything personally. I really wouldn't. If you're gonna dream freaking big.
I'm okay with dreaming big, but some of those, even if we had all the money in the world, I would not want to do. I would not want to do the one through the Major's Choice Park, which is undeveloped,
But that's you.
forested. Oh, I know.
So, so I'm saying, I don't want to take away from a lot of other people that dream of having that just because one person said, I don't want it. So I think that's, when that time comes, do we do that? Well, let's hear from everybody. But I don't think taking it away from here now is the right thing to do.
I think this board is tasked with setting the priorities for the town, and, if a majority of us believe that it should be included, then it should be included. If a majority of us think that it shouldn't, then it shouldn't. And that's, what we're here for. We're here to make those decisions. And so I personally am just going to need a little bit more time to comb through these.
Same, because I only am really familiar with a couple of them. There are quite a few, and I certainly think that if there's a beaten path by the neighborhood, that, well, maybe we should recognize that and make it a formal path. But some of these other, like the one that's through the Major's Choice Park, it's undeveloped, There are deer, there are foxes, there are all that stuff. There's a stream. I mean, we don't have that much really like wild, empty, open space in the town. We have parks and, you know, things on them. I would not want to see that disturbed. Unless there was some huge countervailing weight on the other side of the scale, and I can't think of one.
Would it make sense to have Laura and I set a Teams meeting for her to present everything, to go slowly through the plan so everybody kind of understands what you're getting? And then if there's somebody who doesn't want a particular item, then that can be up for a vote or a decision at a later date?
I'm not sure
Can-
I really want a Teams meeting.
they're just listening.
I'd be happy to participate if somebody else did, but I have gone through it, and most of it was like, you know, the 30% don't drive, that kind of stuff, which we're going to straighten out with changing the language. The rest of them, I mean, I will go through the projects and figure out which ones I feel strongly about, and if everybody else wants to do the same, then maybe we
Right.
can reach some sort of consensus.
Okay, so you wanted,
yeah,
this is
I
for
need-
something to do on your own.
Yeah.
If you have questions, you
For
can
Laura.
call Laura.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes.
Call
and then-
Laura.
We will call Laura.
Call Laura.
Me.
Call Laura.
And even still, if it's, you know, remember, you can have a whole list of projects, but the thing that's going to decide what gets done is the funding. And then
Correct.
we're going to have to approve that funding, this board, whether
Correct.
it's the 5 of us or another 5.
Correct.
So, you know, even though it's projects you don't really are thrilled about, you could still be on there, and it'll be up to, because when funding comes along and some grant or whatever, you may say, hey, is there even a better project? It doesn't, you know what I mean, because
I
there
know, but
might be
I-
something more pressing.
I get that.
5 years
I
from
just
now,
don't like to
but-
put projects on that we haven't really considered and think are good projects, even in a
Yes.
plan.
Even, well, they have to be, you know, they have to pass some
My
level
thought
of
is that
sanity.
I wouldn't want to vote
But-
for a plan that includes projects that I don't feel are a good use of public money. So
Bingo.
I'm sure that most of them are. I just want more
Right.
time to look through them, that's all.
All right, so I
Right,
think
I need
we've,
more time to look through
Yeah.
it too. I mean, I agree with that, but I'm just saying, just because we put it on the plan doesn't necessarily mean it's
Correct.
going to happen.
That is
Or
true,
that
but I
we should
would-
even, you know,
Can we,
seek out to make it happen.
can we set a date of the next work session to
Next work session is
be
when?
done with that review
I'm
No,
not
let's
sure,
do the work session after the next.
after
one.
that? Okay.
given the
So that way we're not
legislation moving
jamming up
through.
the pipeline.
I'm fine, I'm just trying to get a date.
Okay,
Let's do
right, we need to
the,
put it on a date.
not the next work session, but the work session after.
Okay,
Works.
4 weeks.
There you go.
Next session is the 28th, so the one
Give the
after
group a
that-
month.
So, Madam Chair, if I may, there is a fiscal note that attaches with this, and my apology, I missed this in November when Kevin asked me to present this to you, but I've since talked to Lisa. So the money's encumbered, but we would need to have some sort of resolution by June, so that,
on which project?
on the bike ped plan itself, because the
Okay.
monies that were designed for this study are FY '24 monies.
Okay,
So we would just need to have them encumbered by June.
gotcha. So not a particular project, just the,
No, ma'am, just
Plan
the
itself.
plan itself,
All
yes,
right.
ma'am. Thank you.
So the monies for the plan, like Eddie said, they were FY '24 monies that were approved within that budget. Obviously, they weren't spent by the end of fiscal year '24, but we have a quote, a proposal, so we were able to encumber the monies for that project. So that's '24. So we certainly want to complete this and to determine what's spent by fiscal year '25. So that's hence the June 30th deadline. That's a year after fiscal year end. So we want to clean that out before FY '25 is over. Okay.
got it.
Hard copy?
Yes, please.
Yes,
Mary?
please.
Everybody?
I would like one.
Okay,
Steve doesn't want one,
All
and
right.
I'm good too.
okay, sounds good.
All right,
3 hard copies.
all right. Thank you so much, Laura.
Thank you so much.
All right. Next, commissioners' comments.
Madam Chair, I want to very briefly thank DPW staff and the BAPD for their work during the last 2 weather events. They truly are the folks that get no days off, and we appreciate everything they do to keep our community safe and our streets clear. Without them, the town of Bel Air would provide significantly less service to its citizens. And as you always say, if we go missing, nobody would notice. But if they go missing, there would be complaints within the first half hour. So I appreciate them. I also just wanted to note for the public and for my colleagues here that I will be joining the January 21st Town Hall meeting by phone.
All right, thank you so much. You've read my mind about Public Works, but I wanted to say, you know, the town was closed, the county was closed, the state was closed, the commercial haulers did not pick up trash, the Baltimore County dump was closed, Public Works was out picking up the trash after they had plowed snow. So my hat is off to you. Really, I saw a lot of talk on social media from people who didn't get their trash picked up from commercial haulers outside the town on Monday, on Tuesday. Wednesday was kind of dicey whether they were coming or not, but your guys got out there and took care of the snow and then picked up the trash on time. So congratulations. I mean, you know, the post office didn't deliver my mail on Monday or Tuesday, so I don't know what oath your guys took. Was it the post office oath maybe? I don't know.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just, as a public information to you all, I just want to let you know that Maryland American is currently working on approximately 7 to 9 water main breaks in town. They're not really significant in the fact that a lot of water's coming out, but they are slow leaks, and with the cold weather, it is causing some icy conditions. They're aware of all of them, and it usually takes them several weeks to get to them and fix them.
Well, is the work that's going on near the intersection of Broadway and Shamrock, is that our pumping station work?
That is, and
That's what
there's,
I thought.
we were scratching our heads today why it's taking 3 days to make a simple connection for a water. So, but that is for our pump station.
That's what I thought. They
Yeah.
had blocked off the road entirely, and so I was like, I don't think that's a leak or a road problem. I think that's our pumping station
We-
work.
During the cold weather like this, when there is Maryland American water leaks, we do go out and salt periodically just to make sure the road surfaces are safe.
Thank you. We appreciate that.
Yep.
The only other thing I wanted to say at the meeting was I just wanted to recognize the loss of Dr. Street. He was an icon. The town is, you know, much poorer for the loss of him. He worked until 2019 at Boyd and Fulford, which I think is just amazing. And I know I've told some people this story, but when I was knocking on doors in the summer of 2021, I knocked on his, and I'd always admired the house. I drove past it all the time, and he invited me in for a tour. And he said, "Would you like a tour?" I was like, "Yes, I would." So he very kindly took me for a tour of the entire house, and I got some stories over some of the things that were in there. In the kitchen was one of the ice cream social sets, the 2 chairs and the table. And he showed that to me and said it was from the Boyd of Fulford when they had that. And he said they aren't terribly comfortable because we didn't want you to stay too long. So I got a big laugh out of that. And he also told me a story about Boyd and Fulford when they came in with the new countertops, which are the Formica, which was the thing, how they came in with sledgehammers and broke up the old marble countertops. And we we just, you know, were horrified together that had been done. But that was the new thing, and that's what happened to modernize, you know, Boyd and Fulford. So he was such a, you know, so Bel Air that we really have lost, you know, an icon. Any other comments from anybody? No? In that case, do I have a motion to go into closed session?
Yes, Madam Chair, and before I make this motion, I just want to check with the room. We don't have any business regarding appointment of officials to town boards, commissions, and committees, do we?
We do not.
Okay. So in that vein, before I make this motion, I am going to move to amend the agenda to strike that item.
I am going to second that. And
We can just do
all in
acclamation.
favor?
Yeah.
Aye.
All right, having struck that, I will now make the motion. All right. I move that this portion of the meeting will be closed under the provisions of the Maryland Open Meetings Act, General Provisions, Article 3, Section 305B1 and 3305B7 and 8. The topics of discussion will be to obtain legal advice regarding tabled ordinance 83724, amending Article 8 and 14, permitting use tables of the development regulations as related to mixed-use centers in Chapter 165 of the Town Code, and to obtain legal advice regarding tabled ordinance 83824, amending Article 3 and 10 lot requirements, tables of the development regulations as related to density limits in Chapter 165 of the Town Code, and to discuss a personnel matter. The reasons for closed discussions for the above topics will be because public discussion of confidential information and legal strategies can compromise the attorney-client privilege and inhibit the ability of the public body to receive candid and uninhibited legal guidance, and because public discussion of a personnel matter could breach the expectation of confidentiality and fail to protect the privacy of the individuals involved, as well as the integrity of the deliberative process.
Thank you, Commissioner Taylor. Do I have a second?
Second?
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. We're
Madam
now
Chair,
closed.
if I could, I'd like to, well, Steve's already bolted. I would like to, he didn't wait. But I'd like to excuse,
before him.
I'd like
Will
to
you be
excuse Angela.
returning to, okay, so
We
at
will
this
not.
time, we will be turning off the YouTube